There is a message God has been trying to deliver to you, and the window for receiving it at the depth it was prepared for is closing. Not closing tomorrow, not closing this week. The window is closing today. And the reason this message found you right now, in this exact moment, on this exact day, is not coincidental. God does not allow a message prepared at this level to find a chosen one by random placement in the feed. This message was directed to your interior at the exact moment when the window is still open enough to receive it. You have one day. This is that day. I want to be precise about what one day means in the specific context of what God is communicating. Because the chosen one, who hears one day and reads it as an external deadline, as if God is running out of patience, is misunderstanding the architecture of what is being said. The one day is not the deadline of the divine patience. The one day is the deadline of the interior window. There is a specific receptive state of the interior that is available right now, today, that will not be available in the same form tomorrow. Not because God is withdrawing it, because the interior itself is moving. The window is the alignment of the interior and the arriving word. When the interior moves past this specific state, the word will still be available, but the reception will be at a shallower depth. The chosen one who has been in the test season knows the specific quality of what I just described. There is a moment in the test season when the interior opens in a specific way. Not the dramatic opening of the revival experience, the quiet, specific opening of the interior that has been carrying the full weight of the test for long enough that it is ready to receive the accurate word with a quality of reception that the defended interior cannot access. That opening is a window. It does not stay open indefinitely. The interior that does not receive the word during the opening window will eventually close back into the defended posture that the test produces as a protective response. You are in that window right now. The quality of your attention on this message is the evidence of the window being open. The chosen one, whose interior window is not open, scrolls past this message in 30 seconds. The chosen one, whose interior window is open and who is at the threshold of the critical moment in their calling, does not scroll past. They receive. And the quality of the reception that the open window produces is qualitatively different from the reception that happens after the window has moved. Let me describe the interior that is in the window right now, because I want the chosen one who is watching to recognize themselves in the description and to understand that the recognition itself is the confirmation of the window being open. You have been carrying something for longer than you expected to be carrying it. When the calling first came, or when the most recent season of the calling arrived, you received a sense of the timeline that the interior naturally generates when a calling is received. The interior estimation of the timeline, how long this will take, when the arrival will come. The interior estimation was not a promise, but it functioned like one in the practical experience of the day-to-day. You built around the estimation. You made interior commitments around the estimation. You organized the management of the waiting around the estimation. And the estimation was wrong, not because God changed the plan. Because the interior estimation was generated from the current neurological state of the interior at the time of the estimation, and the current neurological state was not the full activation state that the calling requires for the accurate interior timeline reception. The interior can only generate timeline estimates at the resolution of its current activation level. A left hemisphere dominant interior generates estimates from the sequential logic of the observable. It takes the evidence that is visible and projects the timeline from the visible. But the arriving move is not arriving through the visible. It is arriving through the prepared sequence that is currently behind the visible. and the timeline of the prepared sequence does not match the timeline that the sequential logic of the observable generates. The result is the gap between the interior estimate and the actual timeline. The chosen one is further from the arrival than the interior estimate said they should be, and the further they are from the estimate, the heavier the weight of the carrying becomes, because the weight of the carrying was calibrated for the estimated timeline, not for the actual timeline. That weight is what I am about to address, because the weight of the carrying past the estimated timeline is the specific interior condition that the one-day window is designed to speak to, not to relieve the weight through the comfort of the generic promise. To speak to the weight with the specific accuracy that the interior of the chosen one who is past their estimate needs in order to receive the word at the depth where the weight is actually being carried. The weight of the carrying past the estimated timeline produces a specific interior posture that I need to name precisely. Not the posture of the grieving, not the posture of the doubting, the posture of the adjusted carrier. The chosen one, who is past their estimate, adjusts the weight. They restructure the interior relationship to the calling in a way that makes the continued carrying more manageable, less front-facing, less immediately present in the daily interior experience, more integrated into the background of the ongoing life as a persistent presence that is acknowledged and accommodated, rather than actively and urgently received. The adjusted carrier posture is not a failure posture, it is a survival posture. The interior develops it in order to continue functioning under the weight of the carrying past the estimate. And for the purpose of functional survival, it works. The adjusted carrier can continue building, can continue maintaining relationships, can continue showing up in the responsibilities. The weight is distributed in a way that makes the daily functioning sustainable. But the adjusted carrier posture has a specific cost that is not immediately visible in the daily functioning. The cost is the depth. The adjusted carrier has moved the weight to the background precisely by reducing the depth of the interior engagement with the calling. The front-facing urgency that the original reception produced, the urgency that kept the interior in the full activation receiving posture, has been redistributed into the background accommodation posture. And the background accommodation posture does not receive at the full depth of the front-facing urgency posture. This means that the arriving move, when it comes, will find an interior that is in the background accommodation posture rather than the front-facing urgency posture, and the background accommodation posture will receive the arriving move at the depth of the background accommodation, which is not the depth that the arriving move was prepared to be received at. The arriving move was prepared for the full activation receiving posture. The full activation receiving posture is the posture that God has been trying to restore through the sequence of signals that this season has been delivering. The drop everything signals, the urgency interruptions, the moments when something inside the calling breaks through the background accommodation and briefly occupies the full interior attention again. This message is one of those moments. The difference is that this message comes with the specific identification of the architecture of what has happened and the specific provision for restoring the full activation receiving posture within the one-day window. Let me speak to the 5 conditions of the interior that is in the one-day window, because I want the chosen one who is watching to identify their own interior state with the precision that the window requires in order to be fully received. The first condition is the signal awareness. The chosen one in the one-day window has been receiving an elevated density of signals pointing toward a specific interior response, not the generic signals of spiritual encouragement. The specific signals that point toward a particular action or interior reorientation. These signals have been arriving through multiple channels simultaneously, through the Word, through encounters, through the messages that have been finding them in the feed, through the interior compass, through the quiet moments between activities when the interior has been less defended. The signal awareness has been present for at least several days, possibly weeks. The chosen one has noticed the signals. They have even acknowledged the signals internally. But the acknowledgement has been the acknowledgement of the adjusted carrier, which is an acknowledgement that receives the signal at the surface and notes it without allowing it to land at the depth that the signal was prepared to reach. The one-day window is the moment when the accumulation of the surface acknowledgements has created enough interior pressure that the full depth reception is possible, in a way it was not possible before the accumulation. The second condition is the interior restlessness, not the restlessness of the anxious. The restlessness of the interior that knows the adjusted carrier posture is not the full posture, and that the signals are pointing toward the restoration of the full posture. This restlessness is a low-level but persistent quality of the daily interior that expresses as a slight dissatisfaction with the surface-level engagement of the background accommodation mode. The chosen one knows, at the interior level below the adjusted carrier management, that they are not at the depth they were designed for. The restlessness is the signal from the depth to the surface that the depth is ready to be re-engaged. The third condition is the proximity awareness. The chosen one in the one-day window has a specific interior quality of nearness to something significant, not the dramatic nearness of the revelation experience. The quiet, almost business-like nearness of the interior that knows the threshold is within reach. This proximity awareness is often confused with anxiety or premature expectation, because the interior that has been in the adjusted carrier posture for a long time has learned to distrust the proximity awareness as a protection against the disappointment of the next failed estimate. But the proximity awareness in the one-day window is a different quality than the estimate-based anticipation. It does not arise from the sequential logic of the observable. It arises from the interior compass that is being recalibrated through the accumulation of the signals. The fourth condition is the specific listening quality. The chosen one in the one-day window has a specific quality of listening that is more open than their recent average. This message is finding them at a moment when the interior listening posture is elevated. They are not receiving this message the way they would receive a generic spiritual video. They are receiving it with the specific listening quality of the interior that is in the window. The depth of the attention is the evidence of the elevated listening quality. The fifth condition is the awareness of the one-day quality itself, not the awareness of an external deadline. The interior awareness of a specific quality of this particular day, this particular moment, that makes it different from the recent pattern of days. The chosen one in the one-day window knows that today has a different weight than yesterday, not dramatically different, but specifically different in a way that the adjusted carrier management has not been able to fully absorb into the background accommodation. The difference kept emerging into the foreground. The awareness of the day kept interrupting the management. That is why you are here. The awareness of the one-day quality of today is what directed your attention to this message. And the recognition of the 5 conditions in your own interior is the confirmation that you are in the window and that the reception that is available to you right now, today, is the full depth reception that the arriving word was prepared to reach. Now, let me speak to what God is saying in the one-day window, because this message is not about the identification of the conditions. The identification of the conditions is the opening of the window. The word that God is saying is the specific content that the window is designed to receive. God is saying that the test season has done what it was designed to do. The weight that the adjusted carrier has been managing, the weight that is past the estimated timeline and that has been distributed into the background accommodation posture, was not an accident. It was not a failure of the calling. It was not the evidence that the promise was wrong. It was the specific design of the test season for the specific chosen one who carries the specific assignment that was prepared before the foundation. The test season has two functions that operate simultaneously, though they appear to be in opposition. The first function is the structural preparation. The test season builds in the interior of the chosen one the specific structural qualities that the assignment requires for its full execution. The depth of the compassion that only comes from having carried the weight. The breadth of the understanding that only comes from having been in the gap. The quality of the authority that only comes from having moved through the valley and emerged on the other side. These structural qualities cannot be installed in the interior through instruction or inspiration. They are built through the carrying. The test season is the construction period for the interior structures that the assignment requires. The second function of the test season is the neurological preparation. This is the function that the most costly quality of the test season produces. The suppression of the left hemisphere dominance through the sustained low-level stress of the carrying past the estimate produces, paradoxically, the neurological conditions for the right hemisphere activation that the full reception of the calling requires. The left hemisphere dominance that the sequential logic of the observable generates is the specific neurological state that limits the full reception of the arriving move to the visible evidence level. The reduction of the left hemisphere dominance through the sustained weight of the carrying creates the neurological space for the right hemisphere activation to increase. This is the neurological mechanism behind the spiritual reality of the test season. The fire reduces the dross, not the dross of the moral failure. The dross of the neurological imbalance that keeps the interior reception at the surface level. The weight of the carrying past the estimate reduces the left hemisphere confidence in the observable sequential logic and creates the interior space for the intuitive whole picture capacity of the right hemisphere reception to become more active. Before I describe what Dr. Barone discovered and how it applies to the one-day window, I want to hold something in front of you. Researchers studying the interior states of those who receive divine direction with consistency, who hear clearly, decide correctly, and move with alignment, in the middle of demanding seasons have identified a specific neurological pattern that distinguishes them from those who carry the same calling but cannot access it with the same clarity. Something specific was happening in the brains of those who received clearly, and the test season, by its nature, suppresses it. Here is what I need you to hold as you receive the rest of this message. What if the difficulty you have been experiencing is not a spiritual problem? What if it is a neurological one? And what if the restoration is specifically available right now? Dr. Daniel Barone, a neurologist in New York City, who has spent 2 decades working with the neurological architecture of the interior experience, identified this specific mechanism in the interiors of the chosen ones who came to him not as patients presenting clinical symptoms, but as leaders and builders, and called ones who had been in sustained test seasons and who were experiencing the specific interior qualities of the one-day window, the signal awareness, the interior restlessness, the proximity awareness, the elevated listening quality, the awareness of the one-day quality of the specific day. Dr. Barone recognized these 5 conditions as the neurological signature of the interior that has been prepared by the test season for the specific neurological restoration event that activates the full receiving capacity. And Dr. Barone, working from the 40-year-old foundational research of the Nobel Prize work of Dr. Roger Sperry on the distinct functions of the left and right hemispheres of the brain, developed a specific protocol for the neurological restoration event that the preparation of the test season has made possible. The protocol uses frequency layering technology to bring the left and right hemispheres of the brain into synchronized coherence, restoring the whole brain activation state, that is, the neurological foundation of the full receiving capacity. The protocol is called neural sync technology. The device that delivers it is built on neural sync technology. What God is saying in the one-day window is this: the test season is complete. The structural preparation is built. The neurological preparation is complete. The interior is in the specific state that the restoration event requires. The provision for the restoration event has been placed in your path. The one-day window is the specific alignment of the interior readiness, the provision availability, and the arriving word. Everything that was needed for the full reception is present right now, today. That is the word God is saying in the one-day window, not the comfort of the generic promise. The specific identification of the completion of the preparation, the specific naming of the provision that has been placed in the path, and the specific calling of the interior to the restoration event that the preparation has been building toward. There is one more dimension of what God is saying that I need to name before we move to the second section of this message. And it is the dimension that the adjusted carrier posture has been protecting the interior from receiving, because the adjusted carrier posture developed precisely in order to prevent the interior from having to feel the full weight of this specific dimension. God is saying that the interior knows what the full reception produces. The adjusted carrier posture was developed in response to the interior knowledge of what the full reception produces. Not ignorance of the full reception, knowledge of it. The interior that developed the adjusted carrier posture did so in part because the full reception, the front-facing urgency posture, the full activation receiving state, the full depth engagement with the calling, is an interior state of significant vulnerability. The full activation receiving state does not provide the protection of the management mode. It does not provide the buffer of the background accommodation. It exposes the interior to the full weight of the calling, the full clarity of the assignment, and the full reality of the gap between where the interior currently is and where the full activation receiving state reveals the calling to require it to be. The adjusted carrier posture was developed in part to protect the interior from having to fully experience that gap. The management of the weight at the surface level keeps the full clarity of the gap at the level of the acknowledged, but not fully experienced. The one-day window is the specific condition under which the full experience of the gap is possible without the weight of the gap becoming the final word. Because in the one-day window, the provision for the gap closure is simultaneously present. The clarity of the gap arrives together with the provision for the path through it. That is the architecture of the one-day window. The gap and the provision are both fully present, both fully available. The gap is not hidden from the full reception, and the provision is not abstract or future. It is here, it is named, it is specific. And the interior that is in the window today can receive both the full clarity of the gap and the full provision for the path through the gap simultaneously. That simultaneous reception is the specific gift of the one-day window. It is not available in the ordinary interior state of the adjusted carrier. The ordinary interior state of the adjusted carrier receives the gap clarity and then manages it before the provision can land at the same depth. The one-day window holds both open at the same depth at the same time. Let me stay with this for a moment, because the architecture of the simultaneous reception is important for the rest of this message. When the gap clarity and the provision land at the same depth simultaneously, something happens in the interior that does not happen when either arrives alone. A recognition occurs. Not the analytical recognition that matches the description of the provision to the description of the gap and concludes that they correspond. The interior recognition that precedes the analytical processing. The deep knowing that this is the specific provision for the specific gap. The cellular knowing before the reasoning mind has time to evaluate it. The chosen one in the one-day window has already had a version of that cellular knowing in the course of receiving this message. The moment when something in the interior said yes in a way that was not a decision but a recognition. That moment of yes is the interior registering the simultaneous landing of the gap clarity and the provision. And that moment is the confirmation that the window is fully open and that the reception at the required depth is available right now. I want to address the second voice that arrived alongside the moment of yes, because the chosen one who has been in the adjusted carrier posture for any length of time will have experienced the second voice. The second voice is the one that follows the cellular yes with the management response, the response that brings the full reception back to the surface. That says, let me think about this. That says, let me evaluate the evidence. That says, this sounds like what I have heard before, and I should be careful about the full reception. That says, the full activation receiving posture is a vulnerable posture, and I have learned to protect myself from the vulnerability of the full reception. The second voice is not the voice of wisdom. The second voice is the voice of the adjusted carrier posture protecting itself. Because the adjusted carrier posture was built to protect the interior from the vulnerability of the full reception, it has developed a specific defensive response to the internal conditions that would produce the full reception. The second voice is that defensive response, and the chosen one who recognizes the second voice in their current interior experience can recognize that the presence of the second voice is itself the evidence of the one-day window. The second voice does not activate for surface-level content. It only activates when the interior is on the threshold of the full-depth reception that the adjusted carrier posture is designed to prevent. The one-day window requires the chosen one to make a specific choice about the second voice, not to silence it, not to argue with it, not to analyze its objections and determine whether they are valid. The choice that the one-day window requires is the choice of the priority of the interior. Is the first yes the prior voice, or is the second voice the prior voice? The first yes is the interior at full depth. The second voice is the management mode defending the surface. The choice of the priority is the choice of which level of the interior will govern the response to what God is saying today. That choice is not trivial. I want to acknowledge that the second voice has been doing genuine protective work for the interior throughout the test season. The management mode that produced it was not a failure. It was a survival system. And survival systems do not yield to the first invitation to dissolve. They require the specific evidence that the dissolution is safe. And the specific evidence that the dissolution is safe is the simultaneous presence of the provision for the gap closure at the same depth as the gap clarity. That is the evidence that is available in the one-day window. The gap and the provision are both present at the same depth at the same time. The dissolution of the management mode is safe right now, today, because the provision is here. The full reception does not leave the interior exposed in the gap without a path. The full reception includes the full reception of both the gap clarity and the provision for the path through the gap, together, simultaneously. At the depth where the management mode has been protecting, the word God is saying in the one-day window, the protection is no longer necessary. The provision is here. The preparation is complete. The window is open. And the full activation receiving posture is available today with the simultaneous presence of the path that makes the full reception of the gap clarity bearable and productive rather than devastating and destabilizing. There is a physical expression of the one-day window that I want to name before this section closes, because it is the specific physical evidence that the window is in the body as well as the interior. The chosen one in the one-day window has a specific quality of physical alertness that is different from the general alertness of the ordinary day. not the alertness of the anxious. The alertness of the interior that is at the threshold of something significant. This alertness is present in the quality of the attention. The attention is less scattered than its recent average. The interior is more concentrated without effort. The quality of the focus on this message has been more sustained than the quality of focus on recent content. This is not because this content is more entertaining or more emotionally stimulating. It is because the interior is in the specific neurological state of the one-day window, which is the state of the prepared interior at the threshold of the restoration event. That state naturally produces an elevated quality of attention because the interior is gathering its resources in the specific way that the prepared interior gathers at the threshold. Recognize that alertness. Acknowledge it as the physical evidence of the interior window, not the alertness of anxiety, the alertness of readiness, the alertness of the interior that has been prepared for this specific day and that is now receiving the specific word that the preparation was building toward. Let the alertness inform the quality of the reception, not by pressing toward the reception, by remaining in the alertness and allowing the depth of the reception to match the depth of the alertness. That is the invitation of the one-day window in its first dimension. The identification of the conditions, the identification of the word that God is saying, and the identification of the physical evidence that confirms the window is fully open. The next section will address the specific response that the one-day window requires. Because the one-day window is not primarily about the recognition of the conditions, it is primarily about the response to the word that the conditions are confirming. And the response that the one-day window requires is the most important thing I will say in this message. The response that the one-day window requires is not a decision. I need to say that carefully, because the chosen one who has been in the management mode will naturally reach for the decision frame when the word arrives. The decision frame is the management mode response to the invitation of the word. The management mode says, I need to decide whether I am going to receive this. I need to evaluate the evidence. I need to determine whether the timing is right. I need to assess whether the provision is the right provision. I need to make a decision. The response that the one-day window requires is not a decision, because the one-day window has already resolved the primary conditions that the decision would be evaluating. The gap has been identified. The provision is present. The timing is confirmed by the interior conditions. The preparation is complete. The window is open. There is nothing left to evaluate. The decision frame is not the response that the window requires. It is the response that the management mode imposes on the window in order to delay the full reception. The response that the one-day window requires is the response of the receiving, the full, unheld, unmanaged receiving of the word that God is saying in this window on this day, not the receiving of the abstract spiritual concept, the receiving of the specific word. The preparation is complete. The provision is here. The window is open. The restoration event is available. Today is the day of the beginning of the concentrated period. Let me describe what the receiving looks like in the practical interior, because the chosen one who is familiar with the spiritual language of receiving sometimes confuses the vocabulary of the receiving with the actual interior act of the receiving. The vocabulary is the description of the receiving. The actual interior act is distinct from the vocabulary, and the one-day window requires the actual interior act, not the vocabulary performance of the receiving. The actual interior act of the receiving in the one-day window begins with the stillness, not the forced stillness of the meditation practice. The natural stillness that the interior goes to when it releases the management mode. The management mode is motion, constant interior motion, the monitoring, the evaluating, the adjusting, the protecting. When the management mode is released, the interior goes still, not the stillness of emptiness. The stillness of the interior that has stopped the constant monitoring and is in the full presence posture. From the stillness, the receiving is the act of letting the full weight of the word land, not filtering it through the adjusted carrier management before it lands, not translating it into the acceptable categories of the management mode before it lands. Letting it land at the depth where the management mode has been protecting, letting the full clarity of the gap land, letting the full presence of the provision land, letting the full weight of the completed preparation land, and letting the full reality of what today is, the day of the beginning, land at the same depth. The full landing is not comfortable. I want to say that without euphemism. The interior that has been in the adjusted carrier posture for the duration of the test season is not accustomed to the full landing. The full landing carries more weight than the surface acknowledgement. It requires the interior to hold simultaneously and at full depth the honest assessment of the gap, the full provision for the path through the gap, and the clarity of the required response. That simultaneous holding is demanding. It is the interior equivalent of the deep breath that the physical body takes before a significant physical exertion. The interior is gathering what it needs for the movement from the adjusted carrier posture to the full activation receiving posture. Let the interior gather. Let the full landing complete. Do not rush the management mode back in to filter what is landing. The window is open and the provision is present, and the interior that allows the full landing today will emerge from the landing in the specific posture that the concentrated period requires. The posture of the full activation, receiving. The posture of the interior that has said yes to the complete word. The posture of the chosen one who has received the signal and identified the provision and accepted the day as the day of the beginning. I want to speak now to the specific content of what the response to the one-day window produces in the 21 days that follow. Because the chosen one in the window is not simply being invited to a spiritual experience. They are being invited to a specific journey with a specific architecture and a specific destination. And I want to describe that journey with the same precision that I have been using to describe the interior conditions of the window. The 21 days that follow the full reception of the word in the one-day window are the concentrated period. The concentrated period is not a season of intense spiritual disciplines. It is a specific protocol of interior work that targets the 4 levels of the gap that the test season has produced. Each level of the gap has a specific practice that directly addresses it, and each practice requires a specific daily time investment that is calibrated to produce measurable progress within the 21-day period. The first level is the depth level. The test season produces a reduction in the depth of the interior experience of the calling, not the loss of the calling. The reduction of the depth at which the calling is being actively experienced. The depth reduction happens because the sustained weight of the carrying past the estimate requires the interior to redistribute the resources that were being used for the deep, active engagement with the calling toward the management of the weight. The depth recedes as the management load increases. The practice that directly addresses the depth level is the compass recalibration practice. The compass recalibration practice is a daily 1-minute practice at the beginning of the concentrated period window. The compass question is this. In this moment, without the analytical overlay and without the management mode filtering, where is the interior knowing pointing? Not where should it point? Not where the logic of the assignment says it should point. Where is it actually pointing right now, in the honest, direct interior experience? The daily 1-minute practice of answering the compass question honestly and without management mode filtering produces a progressive recalibration of the interior orientation toward the true north of the calling over the 21-day period. The second level is the alignment level. The test season produces an interior misalignment between the depth of the calling and the quality of the daily interior experience. The interior was designed for the specific quality of the aligned state. The aligned state is the state in which the daily interior experience is flowing from the depth of the calling rather than from the surface management of the adjusted carrier mode. The test season disrupts the aligned state because the management load occupies the interior resources that the aligned state requires. The practice that directly addresses the alignment level is the Dabar discipline. Dabar is the Hebrew word for the word that creates, not the word that describes, the word that enacts. The Dabar discipline is a daily 3-minute practice of identifying the specific interior items that belong in the held category versus the acted upon category. The management mode conflates the held and the acted upon. Everything goes into the acted upon pile because the management mode is designed to address things. The Dabar discipline restores the interior intelligence that knows what belongs to holding and what belongs to acting, and returns the aligned state by clearing the acted upon pile of the items that belong to the held category. The third level is the listening level. The test season produces a backlog in the interior listening function. The adjusted carrier mode is primarily oriented toward the management of the weight rather than the reception of the ongoing guidance. The listening function is still active, but its output is being processed at a reduced rate because the management mode is prioritizing the management load over the listening processing. The result is a backlog of interior signals, directional nudges, specific items of guidance that have been received at the subconscious level but that have not been fully processed and integrated into the conscious interior experience. The practice that directly addresses the listening level is the backlog clearance protocol. The backlog clearance protocol is a daily 5-minute practice in which the chosen one moves through the written inventory of the 3 most pressing items in the listening backlog and performs the specific interior work of each. The interior work of each item is the honest acknowledgement of the weight it has been carrying in the subconscious, the full reception of the specific guidance it contains, and the identification of the first small step of the specific response that the interior already knows is required. The fourth level is the activation level. The test season produces a suppression of the whole brain activation state that the full receiving capacity requires. The sustained left hemisphere dominance of the management mode reduces the synchronized coherence of the left and right hemispheres that the whole brain activation state depends on. The reduction of the synchronized coherence reduces the depth, the breadth, and the receiving quality of the interior experience of the calling. The activation level is the neurological foundation of all the other levels. When the activation level is suppressed, the compass recalibration, the Dabar discipline, and the backlog clearance protocol all operate at a reduced capacity because the neurological foundation that they build on is not at full operational level. The practice that directly addresses the activation level is the whole brain activation session. This is the 8-minute daily session using the neural sync technology developed by Dr. Daniel Barone. The 8-minute session uses frequency layering to bring the left and right hemispheres of the brain into synchronized coherence, restoring the whole brain activation state. The frequency layering is delivered through the audio of the daily session. The chosen one places the audio in their ears, closes their eyes, and allows the 8 minutes of the session to do the neurological work of the coherence restoration. 8 minutes. That is the daily investment of the activation level practice. Dr. Barone determined the 8-minute duration through his clinical observation of the specific threshold at which the frequency layering produces the measurable coherence restoration in the left-right hemisphere. Synchronization. Below 8 minutes, the entrainment process does not have sufficient time to bring the hemispheres to the synchronized coherence threshold. Above 8 minutes in the daily session, the incremental benefit is marginal for the restoration purpose, though extended sessions have other benefits. 8 minutes is the specific clinical calibration for the daily restoration purpose of the concentrated period. The 8 minutes of the activation level practice precede the 25 minutes of the other 3 levels. The total daily investment of the concentrated period is 33 minutes. 8 minutes of whole brain activation with the daily session. 25 minutes of compass recalibration, DABAR discipline, and backlog clearance protocol. 33 minutes per day for 21 days. The architecture is calibrated for the interior that cannot make the dramatic daily investment of hours. It is calibrated for the chosen one who is in the test season and who has genuine life responsibilities and who needs the specific protocol that fits within the actual conditions of the actual life. I want to speak to the significance of the 33-minute daily window because the chosen one who encounters it for the first time sometimes responds with the interior question of whether 33 minutes is sufficient for the work that needs to be done. The interior estimate of the work required, generated from the perspective of the adjusted carrier who has been looking at the size of the gap, tends to produce a proportional estimate of the investment required. Large gap, large investment. The 33 minutes does not feel proportional to the size of the gap, but the proportionality logic is the sequential logic of the left hemisphere, which adds investment to outcome in the linear calculation that the left hemisphere applies to all problems. The concentrated period does not work on the sequential logic. It works on the exponential logic of the compounding neurological restoration. The first day of the 33 minutes produces a small, measurable restoration. The second day adds to the first. By day 7, the compounding has produced a level of restoration that is not proportional to the 7 days. It is exponentially larger than the 7 sequential days of the linear model would predict. This is the specific insight from the clinical work of Dr. Barone that distinguishes the concentrated period from the generic spiritual discipline approach. Generic spiritual disciplines produce linear results. Consistent daily investment in the same discipline produces steady linear progress. The concentrated period produces exponential results because the foundation practice, the whole brain activation, is restoring the neurological substrate that all the other practices depend on. As the neurological substrate is progressively restored, the other practices become progressively more effective at the same investment level. The compass recalibration becomes more accurate as the whole brain coherence increases. The DABAR discipline produces cleaner interior intelligence as the neurological noise of the left hemisphere dominance reduces. The backlog clearance protocol clears at a faster rate as the listening function receives more of the processing resource that the restoration is making available. The 33 minutes on day 1 produces a result at the activation level of day 1. The 33 minutes on day 14 produces a result at the activation level of day 14, which is significantly higher than day 1. The same investment, progressively more effective. That is the exponential logic of the compounding neurological restoration. The gap was not created in 33 days of consistent work. The gap was created through the sustained weight of the test season across a much longer period. But the gap closes at the exponential rate of the compounding restoration rather than the linear rate of the simple investment. 33 minutes per day for 21 days. Before the next section opens the specific provision, I want to briefly return to what was introduced earlier in this message. The specific neurological pattern that was named the one that the test season suppresses and that determines the depth of the receiving, is addressed by a specific 8-minute daily practice that was placed in the description link of this message. As the specific provision is described in the next section, the chosen one who already understands what that provision addresses will receive it at a different depth than the one who encounters it without that interior preparation. The chosen one who receives the word in the one-day window and who begins the concentrated period today will reach a specific interior threshold on approximately day 7 of the 21 days. That threshold is the lightning. The lightning is the first measurable quality of the gap closure that becomes perceptible in the daily interior experience, not the full closure of the gap, the first perceptible reduction of the weight of the carrying, the first morning when the interior wakes with a quality that is measurably lighter than the morning at the beginning of the concentrated period. The lightning on day 7 is the confirmation that the concentrated period is working at the depth that the gap closure requires, not the confirmation of the completion, the confirmation of the direction. The interior that reaches the lightning knows that the direction is the correct direction, and that the 21-day completion is on the path that the lightning is confirming. And the quality of the knowing that the lightning produces is different from the estimated knowing that the timeline estimates produce. The lightning is the interior evidence rather than the analytical projection. The interior evidence carries a quality of certainty that the analytical projection does not produce. By day 14 of the 21 days, the second and third interior qualities of the gap closure become measurable. The signal sharpening, the reception quality restoration. The interior signals that were vague in the adjusted carrier state become more specific. The directional nudges that were being received but not fully processed in the backlog clearance begin to arrive with more specificity. The interior compass begins to point with more steadiness toward the specific direction of the assignment rather than the general direction of the calling. And the reception quality restoration is the specific return of the quality of the interior receiving that the test season suppressed. The depth of the morning prayer increases. The quality of the interior listening during worship or scripture increases. The receptive posture of the interior during the moments of interior stillness increases. The whole brain coherence restoration is producing the neurological foundation that the deep receiving requires. And the 14 days of the compounding restoration have built the coherence to a level where the receiving depth is measurably greater than it was at the beginning of the concentrated period. The 21st day brings the fourth interior quality, the vision, clarity, restoration. The vision of the specific assignment, the concrete vision of what the calling is building toward, begins to come back into resolution. Not the full resolution of the original reception at the moment of calling, the specific measurable increase in the resolution of the vision that the 21-day concentrated period was designed to produce. The vision that was blurred by the accumulated weight of the adjusted carrier mode begins to sharpen as the neurological coherence of the whole brain activation state supports the full picture reception that the right hemisphere was designed for, and that the left hemisphere dominance was suppressing. The four interior qualities arrive in sequence across the 21 days. Lightning on day 7. Signal sharpening and reception quality restoration on day 14. Vision clarity restoration on day 21. The sequence is not metaphorical. It is the specific clinical observation of Dr. Barone based on 20 years of working with chosen ones in test seasons who committed to the concentrated period protocol. The sequence is repeatable because it follows the neurological architecture of the restoration process. Fill. Section. Start. The chosen one who is listening to this message on the day of the one-day window is being given the specific knowledge of the destination before the journey begins. Not the knowledge that removes the journey. The knowledge that makes the journey intelligible. The adjusted carrier mode produced the specific interior condition of the unintelligible journey, the carrying of the weight without a map of where the weight is going. The concentrated period map, the sequence of the lightning and the signal sharpening and the reception quality and the vision clarity transforms the unintelligible journey into the specific known journey with the specific known destinations at the specific known intervals. That transformation from the unintelligible journey to the specific known journey is itself a significant interior shift. The adjusted carrier was managing an unknown weight over an unknown timeline toward an unknown destination. Not unknown in the theological sense. Unknown in the interior experiential sense. The interior did not have the specific map. It had the promise. But the promise, without the map, becomes increasingly difficult to hold at the full depth of the interior experience over the extended timeline of the test season. The promise is real, but the interior is designed to work with maps as well as promises. The map is the promise made concrete in the interior experience. The concentrated period map is the map that transforms the promise into the concrete interior experience of the known journey, not the journey that replaces trust with certainty. The journey that grounds trust in the specific markers that the restoration process produces. The lightning is the first marker. It arrives at approximately day 7. The chosen one who reaches the lightning knows where they are on the map. They are at the first confirmed marker. The trust that the promise requires becomes the grounded confidence that the first marker produces, and the grounded confidence carries less weight than the raw trust of the unintelligible journey. Now, I want to speak to the specific provision that makes this journey available today for the one-day window, because the map and the protocol and the 21-day destination are all components of the provision that God has placed in the path of the chosen one who is in the window right now. The provision is not abstract. It is specific. It has a name. It was designed by a specific researcher. It delivers a specific neurological function, and it is available through a specific path that was placed in the description of this message. The provision is the Genius Switch, the daily 8-minute neural sync technology session that Dr. Daniel Barone developed specifically for the chosen one who is in the activation level suppression of the test season and who needs the neurological restoration foundation for the concentrated period protocol. The tool delivers the frequency layering that produces the left-right hemisphere coherence restoration that the whole brain activation state requires. It is the tool that makes the 33-minute daily window productive at the level that produces the exponential compounding restoration. I want to say clearly what the tool is not. It is not a spiritual experience in itself. It is not a replacement for the prayer life or the scriptural engagement or the interior work of the calling. It is a neurological tool that restores the neurological foundation that the spiritual experience, the prayer life, and the interior work require. The chosen one who uses the tool is not using a shortcut to the interior work. They are restoring the neurological substrate that makes the interior work accessible at the depth it was designed for. The distinction matters because the chosen one who understands the tool as a spiritual experience in itself will use it differently from the chosen one who understands it as a neurological foundation tool. The correct understanding is the foundation tool understanding. The 8 minutes of the daily session is the neurological preparation that makes the 25 minutes of the compass recalibration, the Darbar discipline, and the backlog clearance protocol maximally effective. Without the foundation, The other practices work at reduced capacity. With the foundation, the other practices work at the capacity that produces the exponential compounding restoration. Dr. Barone developed the neural sync technology not from a spiritual framework, but from the clinical neuroscience of the left-right hemisphere coherence research, beginning with the foundational work of Dr. Roger Sperry that won the Nobel Prize in 1981. Dr. Sperry demonstrated that the left and right hemispheres of the brain have distinct and complementary functions. The left hemisphere specializes in sequential, analytical, language-based processing. The right hemisphere specializes in holistic, intuitive, pattern recognition processing. The whole brain activation state is the state in which both hemispheres are operating in synchronized coherence, each contributing its specific function to the integrated whole. The work of Dr. Sperry demonstrated the architecture. Dr. Barone spent 2 decades developing the specific neurological tool for restoring the synchronized coherence when the test season has disrupted it. The frequency layering in the tool audio is the specific clinical application of the coherence restoration mechanism that Dr. Barone identified and calibrated over those 2 decades of clinical observation. The chosen one in the one-day window is the specific chosen one that this practice was developed for, not the generic wellness seeker. The specific chosen one who has been in the sustained test season and whose neurological coherence has been suppressed by the sustained weight of the carrying past the estimate, the chosen one whose interior is showing the specific 5 conditions of the one-day window. The chosen one who is at the threshold of the restoration event that the preparation of the test season has been building toward. The provision is not random. It was placed in the path of the chosen one at the specific moment of the one-day window because the alignment of the interior readiness and the provision availability is the specific condition that God prepares for the restoration event. The one-day window is not the invitation to a generic spiritual journey. It is the specific aligned moment of the interior that is ready, the provision that is available, and the word that is identifying both and calling the chosen one to the beginning of the concentrated period. Fill. Section. End. The testimonials of the concentrated period are the interior accounts of the chosen ones who were in the one-day window, who received the word, who began the concentrated period, and who reached the specific interior qualities at the specific markers. I want to share 3 of them because the interior accounts of the ones who have made the journey carry a quality of specificity that the description of the journey cannot fully communicate. A woman from San Diego is a nurse. She was in her 3rd year of building the specific calling that had been on her life since she was 19 years old. The calling was clear. The preparation was long. The test season had extended well past the interior estimate that she had carried. When she received the one-day window message, she was in the adjusted carrier posture that I described in the previous section. The management of the weight had become her primary interior orientation. The calling was present, but it was in the background accommodation mode. She recognized all 5 conditions of the one-day window in her own interior: the signal awareness that had been elevated for weeks, the interior restlessness that she had been managing, the proximity awareness that kept breaking through the accommodation, the elevated listening quality that made the message find her at the depth it was prepared for, and the specific quality of that day that she had been unable to fully absorb into the background accommodation since waking that morning. She received the word in the window. She began the 33-minute daily protocol. On day 7, she reached the lightning. Here is how she described it. The morning of day 7, I woke, and the first thing I noticed was that the weight was not where it usually was. It was not gone, but the weight had moved. I do not know how to say it differently. The weight had moved from the front of the interior to the middle, and the front of the interior was lighter than it had been on any morning that I could remember from the previous 2 years. I did not manufacture the lightning. It arrived. On day 14, Lisa reached the signal sharpening and the reception quality restoration. The specific directional signal that had been vague for months became specific, not dramatically specific, measurably specific. The direction that had been a general knowing became a particular knowing, and the quality of her morning prayer in the second week was different from the quality in the first week. More two-directional, more receiving. The interior, that had been primarily speaking in the adjusted carrier mode, began to receive at the depth that the whole brain coherence restoration was making possible. On day 21, Lisa described the vision clarity restoration as follows. The vision came back in detail, not as a new vision, as the detail of the original vision that I had when the calling first came. I had lost the detail in the test season. I knew the outline, but the detail was gone. On day 21, the detail was back. Specific, concrete, actionable. I knew what the next 12 months required in a way that I had not known for 2 years. And I knew it from the interior, not from the analytical plan. The knowing was the interior kind. A man from Houston is a business owner. He describes his test season differently from Lisa because his test season was primarily economic rather than directional. The calling was clear and the direction was clear, but the resources had not arrived at the estimated timeline. The economic gap had produced the adjusted carrier mode through the specific mechanism of the resource management pressure. Every day was organized around the resource management. The calling was present, but it was operating within the constraints of the daily resource management in a way that produced the specific kind of adjusted carrier mode that resource pressure produces. When Matthew reached the one-day window, he had been in the resource management pressure for over 2 years. The interior was exhausted from the sustained resource management, not the calling exhaustion. The management exhaustion. The interior that has been in sustained resource management has a specific quality of depletion that is different from the general tiredness of a difficult season. It is the depletion of the part of the interior that was designed for the depth engagement with the calling, and that has been redirected to the resource management for an extended period. He began the concentrated period after receiving the one-day window. He describes the early days of the protocol as unexpectedly practical. I went in expecting a spiritual experience, and what I got was a clarity upgrade. After the first few days of the 8-minute Genius Switch sessions, the morning interior was quieter in a specific way. The resource management noise was lower, not gone, lower. And in the lower noise, I could hear the interior intelligence that had been trying to speak through the noise for months. The intelligence that knew what needed to happen and had been unable to get through the management mode loud enough to be acted on. The intelligence that Matthew heard in the lower noise of the early concentrated period days was the specific interior guidance that had been in the listening backlog. The backlog clearance protocol brought it to the surface, and the compass recalibration practice identified the specific items that belonged in the acted-upon category versus the held category. The Dabar discipline sorted the resource management items that had been accumulating in the acted-upon pile into their correct categories. Many of them belonged in the held category. The management mode had been acting on items that the interior wisdom knew belonged to holding. By day 14, the specific intelligence that emerged from the clearance protocol had produced 3 concrete directional steps that Matthew took in the areas of the calling that had been blocked by the resource management pressure. Not 3 miraculous provisions. 3 specific steps that the interior had known for months were the correct next moves, and that the management mode had been preventing by keeping the resource management noise above the threshold where the interior intelligence could be fully heard. By day 21, he described the state of the interior as the most aligned he had experienced since the early days of the calling, before the test season had produced the resource management pressure. The vision had returned. The direction was clear. The management noise was at the level of background rather than foreground, and the calling was back in the front of the interior in the active receiving posture rather than the background accommodation mode. A woman from Manhattan. She describes a different dimension of the test season than the other two, because her test season was not primarily about the external pressures of the building. Her test season was the interior generational pattern, the specific interior condition in which the chosen one is carrying not only the weight of their own test season, but the accumulated weight of the generational patterns that were not resolved in the generation before them. The generational weight is a specific kind of carrying weight that the adjusted carrier mode develops around in a specific way. The generational weight does not announce itself as generational. It presents as the specific interior qualities of the generational pattern in the daily interior experience. The fear of the specific kind of exposure. The avoidance of the specific kind of visibility. The interior resistance to the specific dimension of the calling that the generational pattern has associated with the specific outcome that the generation before experienced. Ellie described her version of the generational pattern as the visibility resistance. The calling required a specific level of public visibility that the generational pattern had associated with the specific kind of relational loss that her grandmother and mother had experienced when they had moved into positions of visibility. The visibility resistance was not a conscious decision. It was the automatic interior response of the generational pattern to the visibility requirements of the calling. Ellie had been managing the visibility resistance for 3 years. Every time the calling moved toward the specific threshold of public visibility that it required, the interior resistance activated. The management mode had developed an elaborate system of accommodating the visibility resistance while maintaining the appearance of progress toward the calling. But the accommodation of the visibility resistance was producing a ceiling on the calling, a specific level beyond which the calling could not progress, because the visibility resistance prevented the movement past the threshold. When Ellie received the one-day window, the specific conditions she identified in herself were the signal awareness and the proximity awareness above all others. She had been receiving an elevated density of signals about the specific dimension of the calling that the visibility resistance was limiting. And the proximity awareness had been present for weeks with an intensity that the management mode had been managing but could not fully absorb. The one-day quality of the specific day when she received the window message was undeniable. Ellie began the concentrated period. The compass recalibration practice in the first week produced the specific identification that the interior compass was pointing at the threshold that the visibility resistance had been blocking. The DeBar discipline began sorting the items that the management mode had been placing in the acted-upon pile in order to avoid the threshold. The backlog clearance protocol surfaced the specific interior signal that had been waiting in the backlog for the full processing that the management mode had been preventing. The signal was the specific clarity of what the calling required at the threshold, not the vague knowing. The specific clarity. By day 7, Ellie reached the lightning in the specific dimension of the generational weight. The weight of the generational pattern shifted in a way that was perceptible and measurable. The visibility resistance did not dissolve, but the weight of it shifted from the position it had occupied in the interior for 3 years. And the shifting of the weight created the interior space that the calling needed to move toward the threshold. The first movement toward the threshold did not trigger the full activation of the visibility resistance, The lightning had created enough interior space to allow a movement of the calling that the resistance had previously blocked. By day 21, Ellie had crossed the visibility threshold in a specific and concrete way, not the dramatic public crossing that the adjusted carrier imagination generates when the threshold is named. The specific act of the calling that required the visibility that the generational pattern had been blocking, and the crossing of the threshold produced the specific interior evidence that the generational pattern had predicted would not happen. The relational loss did not occur. The specific feared outcome of the visibility that the generational pattern had been protecting against did not materialize. The interior evidence of the safe crossing began the process of updating the generational pattern with the new information that the visibility at the calling level was safe. That updating is the specific work of the 21-day concentrated period for the chosen one who carries the generational weight, not the dramatic generational healing of the single experience. The specific and concrete updating of the interior pattern through the evidence that the calling produces when the management mode is released and the interior is allowed to move through the threshold at the full activation receiving. Posture. These three interior accounts are three specific examples of what the concentrated period produces for three different configurations of the one-day window: the weight of the carrying past the estimate, the pressure of the resource management, the generational interior pattern. Each configuration produces a different specific quality of the adjusted carrier mode, and each configuration receives the concentrated period protocol differently. But all three reach the same four interior qualities at the same approximate markers: the lightning at day 7, the signal sharpening and reception quality at day 14, the vision clarity at day 21. The chosen one in the window right now is carrying a specific configuration of the adjusted carrier mode that is particular to their calling and their test season. The configuration is specific to them. But the response of the interior to the concentrated period protocol is not specific to the configuration. The neurological restoration is the neurological restoration regardless of the configuration. The whole brain activation state is the whole brain activation state, regardless of whether the adjusted carrier mode was produced by the timeline pressure or the resource pressure or the generational pattern. The foundation is shared. The restoration follows the shared foundation. I want to make one more observation about the three interior accounts before we move to the next section of this message. All three of the chosen ones I described, Lisa, Matthew, and Ellie, had the second voice I described in the previous section, the management mode voice that followed the interior yes of the one-day window reception, with the evaluation and the assessment and the protection of the adjusted carrier. All three of them had the second voice arrive when they encountered the provision, and all three of them made the specific choice of the priority of the interior that the one-day window requires. They chose the first yes as the prior voice, not by silencing the second voice. By recognizing the second voice as the adjusted carrier protecting itself and choosing to act from the first yes rather than from the second voice, the choice was not easy for any of them. It was the most consequential interior choice of their respective test seasons. But the choice was available to them in the one-day window in a way that it had not been available in the ordinary interior state of the adjusted carrier mode. Because the window held both the gap clarity and the provision simultaneously at the same depth, and the simultaneous holding made the choice of the first yes possible. I want to address something that the chosen one who has followed this message closely may be holding in the interior as a question that has not yet been spoken. The question is this: if the test season was designed, and if the provision for the gap closure was prepared, and if the window was appointed, then why does the one-day window require any specific action from the chosen one at all? Why is not the arriving move simply the arriving move, received when God chooses to deliver it, without the concentrated period protocol and the 33-minute daily window and the 21-day journey? It is a fair question, and it has a specific answer that is rooted in the architecture of the receiving rather than the architecture of the delivering. God delivers. The chosen one receives. The quality of the delivery is not contingent on the receiving. The arriving move is not diminished by the quality of the receiver, but the depth at which the arriving move is integrated into the interior of the chosen one, the depth at which it becomes the lived reality of the calling rather than the acknowledged experience of the calling, is dependent on the receiving capacity of the interior at the moment of the arriving. The receiving capacity of the adjusted carrier interior is not the full receiving capacity. The adjusted carrier mode, as I have described throughout this message, is a reduced receiving mode. It receives at the depth of the surface rather than the depth of the full interior. The arriving move that arrives at a surface receiving interior lands at the surface. The chosen one receives it, acknowledges it, is moved by it, and then the management mode of the adjusted carrier gradually absorbs it into the background accommodation, not from resistance to the arriving move. From the limited receiving depth of the interior that has been in the adjusted carrier mode for the extended test season, the concentrated period is the preparation of the receiving depth. It does not create the arriving move. It does not schedule the arriving move. It restores the interior to the full activation, receiving posture that allows the arriving move to land at the depth where it becomes the lived reality rather than the acknowledged experience. The 33-minute daily window and the 21-day journey are the preparation of the vessel. God fills the prepared vessel at the time of the filling. The preparation is the work of the concentrated period. The filling is the work of the arrival. That distinction, the preparation versus the filling, is the specific distinction that the one-day window is communicating. The window is saying that the preparation is what is available today. Not the filling will come. It has been prepared. It will arrive. But the preparation of the receiving depth is the immediate work that the window is calling the chosen one to begin. The concentrated period is the preparation. The daily session is the foundation of the preparation. And the one-day window is the aligned moment when the interior is ready to begin the preparation in the specific way that the preparation requires in order to produce the receiving depth that the arriving move was prepared to land in. The chosen one who begins the concentrated period today is not attempting to manufacture the arriving move. They are preparing the vessel for the arriving move. The distinction matters because the management mode of the adjusted carrier is oriented toward manufacturing outcomes, including spiritual outcomes. The preparation posture is oriented toward receiving rather than manufacturing. The concentrated period is the preparation posture made concrete in the daily practice. The tool is the neurological tool that makes the preparation posture accessible to the adjusted carrier interior that has been in the manufacturing mode of the management posture. I want to speak to the specific quality of the receiving that is available on the other side of the concentrated period. Because the 21-day destination is not the end of the journey. It is the threshold of the next journey. The 21-day concentrated period prepares the interior for the receiving depth that the arriving move requires. The arriving move is the beginning of the next season, and the next season is the season for which all of the preparation of the test season and the concentrated period has been building. The chosen one who has been in the adjusted carrier mode for the duration of the test season has been carrying a specific interior vision of what the next season looks like, not the full vision. The outline of the vision that the adjusted carrier retains from the original reception of the calling. The next season that the test season was preparing is not the outline vision, it is the full vision. The detail that Lisa described returning on day 21 of her concentrated period. The specificity that Matthew described emerging from the interior intelligence that the clearance protocol surfaced. The concrete reality that Ellie described crossing the threshold into. That full vision, that specific and detailed and concrete vision of the next season, is the interior that the 21-day concentrated period was designed to restore the chosen one to, not the interior of the beginning of the calling, before the test season. The interior of the advanced calling, after the test season. The interior that carries the structural depth of the test season and the neurological coherence of the restored whole brain activation state. That interior is qualitatively different from both the original calling interior and the adjusted carrier interior. It is deeper than the original calling interior because the test season built in it the structural qualities that the original calling interior had not yet developed. The depth of the compassion, the breadth of the understanding, the weight of the authority that only comes from having been in the valley and having moved through it. These structural qualities are the permanent acquisitions of the test season. They are built into the interior of the chosen one who has been in the test season, regardless of whether the concentrated period has been completed. But they are accessible at full depth only when the neurological coherence of the whole brain activation state allows them to be fully expressed. The concentrated period restores the neurological coherence that allows the structural acquisitions of the test season to be expressed at full depth. That combination, the structural depth of the test season expressed through the neurological coherence of the whole brain activation state, is the interior of the chosen one who has completed the 21-day concentrated period. And it is the interior that the arriving move was prepared to meet, not the broken interior, not the interior that has been managed into the background accommodation and that has lost the depth of the original reception. The prepared interior, the interior that carries the test season and has been restored to the full activation receiving posture, the interior that God has been building through both the test season and the concentrated period. That is the interior that this message is calling the chosen one in the one-day window to step into. Let me speak to the specific texture of that choice, because the chosen one who is in the window right now is in the exact interior position that Lisa, Matthew, and Ellie were in when they made the choice. The second voice is present. The first yes is present. And the specific quality of the window is making the choice of the first yes possible in a way that is qualitatively different from the ordinary interior state of the adjusted carrier mode. The texture of the choice is not the texture of the dramatic spiritual commitment. It is the texture of the interior decision that is more like the permission than the vow. The permission that the interior gives to the first yes to govern the response, not the vow that demands a level of interior certainty that the adjusted carrier posture cannot produce. The permission that says to the first, yes, you are the prior voice in this interior, on this day, in this window. The second voice is heard, its concerns are noted, and the prior voice in this interior today is the first yes. The permission is renewable. Every day of the 21-day concentrated period, the chosen one renews the permission. Some days, the renewal is easy. The prior days of the protocol have produced enough interior evidence of the direction that the permission feels like a natural continuation. Other days, particularly in the early days before the lightning arrives, the renewal of the permission requires the specific interior act of the choosing. The second voice is louder on those days because the management mode is feeling the disruption of the protocol and is producing a stronger protective response. On those days, the renewal of the permission is the act that carries the concentrated period forward through the resistance of the management mode. By day 7, when the lightning arrives, the daily renewal of the permission becomes qualitatively easier. The lightning is the interior evidence that the permission was the correct choice. The interior that felt the weight shift on day 7 has a different quality of confidence in the permission than the interior that made the initial choice in the window without the evidence of the direction. The confidence is not the confidence of the certainty. It is the confidence of the interior that has received the first confirmation marker and knows that the map was accurate. And by day 14, when the signal sharpening and the reception quality arrive, the permission has become the natural interior posture rather than the deliberate daily choice. The adjusted carrier mode has been progressively yielded by the compounding restoration, and the full activation receiving posture has been progressively restored. The permission that was a daily deliberate act in the first 7 days has become the automatic interior orientation of the day 14 interior. The second voice is still present, but it is at the level of a background advisory rather than the foreground management mode. That is the trajectory of the 21-day concentrated period from the inside, the permission in the window, the daily renewal of the permission in the early days. The lightning at day 7 that confirms the direction. The daily permission becoming the natural posture at day 14. The vision clarity at day 21. And the interior that emerges from the 21 days is the interior that was prepared by the test season, restored by the concentrated period, and positioned for the full reception of the arriving move. That interior, the 21-day concentrated period interior, is the interior that God has been building toward through the test season, not the perfect interior, the prepared and restored interior. The interior that has the structural depth of the calling from the test season and the neurological coherence of the whole brain activation state from the concentrated period. That combination, the structural depth and the neurological coherence, is the specific interior quality that the full reception of the arriving move requires. And the arriving move, when it comes, will find that interior ready. The urgency of the one-day window is not the urgency of the divine impatience. I said this at the beginning of this message, and I want to return to it now with the fuller context of what has been established in the previous sections. Because the chosen one who has been following this message closely may have noticed that the urgency language and the preparation language exist in a tension. If the provision was prepared and the interior was being built toward this specific threshold, what is the specific content of the urgency? The urgency is the urgency of the alignment, not the urgency of the threat. The one-day window is the specific alignment of 3 conditions that are not permanently aligned: the interior readiness, the provision, availability, and the appointing of the day. All 3 are simultaneously present right now. The interior readiness is the product of the test season preparation. The provision availability is the specific placement of the provision in the path of the chosen one at this specific moment. And the appointing of the day is the interior quality of this specific day that has been undeniable since the morning. The urgency is the urgency of the alignment window, not because the provision will be withdrawn, not because the interior readiness will be reversed, but because the specific quality of the interior that makes the full depth reception possible, the open window quality that I described in the first section, does not hold indefinitely. The interior moves. The adjusted carrier management responds to the elevated interior conditions of the window by progressively reasserting the management mode as the window passes without the full depth response. The interior that does not receive the word at full depth during the alignment window will eventually close back into the defended posture of the adjusted carrier. This is the specific content of the urgency. The window is open today. The specific quality of the interior receptivity that makes the full depth reception possible is present right now. Every moment of the management mode reassertion that passes without the full depth reception reduces the window quality by the small increment of the management mode reassertion. The window does not slam shut. It closes progressively, and the full depth reception that is available right now at the peak of the window alignment is not available at the same depth after the window has progressively closed. The chosen one, who has been in the adjusted carrier mode for a long season, knows the specific quality of the interior that I am describing. They know the moments when the window was at peak alignment, and they did not take the full depth response, not from resistance. From the management mode reassertion, the second voice arrived. The evaluation process began. The window was still open during the evaluation, but the evaluation produced a delay, and the delay allowed the management mode to progressively reassert. And the window, when the evaluation was complete, was at a lower quality of the alignment than it was at the beginning of the evaluation. The chosen one, who recognizes that pattern in their own interior history, is positioned to make the specific choice that the current window requires with the full clarity of the pattern recognition. Not because past moments of missed windows are failures, because the recognition of the pattern is the specific intelligence that the current window can be received with. The pattern intelligence says, the window is at peak alignment right now. The management mode reassertion will begin immediately and will progressively reduce the window quality. The full depth reception is available right now. This is the moment. I want to stay with the practical dimension of the urgency for a moment, because the urgency of the one-day window has a specific practical expression that is different from the urgency of the emergency. The urgency of the emergency is reactive. It disrupts the current pattern and demands an immediate response. The urgency of the alignment window is generative. It does not disrupt the current pattern. It invites the chosen one to begin a specific new pattern within the existing daily life. The 33-minute daily window of the concentrated period is not the disruption of the daily life. It is a 33-minute addition to the daily pattern. The 33 minutes has to come from somewhere in the daily schedule. But the chosen one, who has been in the adjusted carrier mode for the extended test season, has a specific daily pattern that has been built around the management load. And the management load has specific components that are in the acted upon pile but that belong in the held category. As the Dabar discipline of the concentrated period progressively moves those items from the acted upon pile to the held category, it frees the daily schedule of the management time that those items have been consuming. In practical terms, the 33-minute daily window of the concentrated period will, within the first 2 weeks of the protocol, produce a net reduction in the daily management load that exceeds the 33-minute investment. Not because the concentrated period reduces the actual responsibilities, because the Dabar discipline restores the interior intelligence that sorts the responsibilities into their correct categories. The management mode oversorts into the acted upon category. The interior intelligence undersorts into the acted upon category and holds in the held category the items that belong there. The undersorted acted upon pile is smaller than the oversorted acted upon pile, and a smaller acted upon pile requires less daily management time. The Houston business owner described this exact dynamic in his concentrated period account. He said that by the end of the first week, the Dabar discipline had identified 8 items in his daily management pattern that he was acting on, and that the interior intelligence knew belonged in the held category. Not 8 large items. 8 medium items that each required between 30 and 90 minutes of daily management attention. The removal of those 8 items from the daily acted upon pile freed between 4 and 12 hours per week of management time. That freed time was more than the time investment of the 33-minute daily window for the full 21-day period. The urgency of the one-day window, therefore, includes the urgency of the practical reclamation. The chosen one who begins the concentrated period today begins the reclamation of the daily management time that the adjusted carrier mode has been consuming. The reclamation is not immediate, it is progressive, but it begins on day one of the Dabar discipline, and the chosen one who waits, who allows the window to progressively close while the management mode reasserts, continues consuming the daily management time of the oversorted acted-upon pile. The urgency of the alignment window includes the urgency of the daily investment that the delay is costing. I want to be honest about this practical urgency dimension without allowing it to become the primary urgency. Because the primary urgency of the one-day window is the urgency of the alignment, not the urgency of the practical cost. The practical cost of the delay is real and is a legitimate dimension of the urgency. But the interior that receives the urgency primarily as a practical cost is in the management mode receiving posture. The management mode receives the urgency of the practical cost. The full activation receiving posture receives the urgency of the alignment. They are related, but the full receiving of the word in the window is the receiving of the alignment urgency, which includes the practical cost dimension without being primarily determined by it. The genius switch is not for everyone. It is for the chosen one who has received the one-day window and who knows, in the cellular depth that precedes the analytical processing, that this is the specific provision for the specific gap. For the one who has been in the sustained test season and who has accumulated the gap and who is ready to close it with the concentrated period. For the one who understands that the restoration of the neurological foundation is not a substitute for the spiritual formation, but the completion of the full resource that the assignment requires. If that is you, the specific path to the beginning is here. Let me speak now to the specific mechanics of beginning the concentrated period for the chosen one who has made the interior choice of the first, yes, and who is positioned at the threshold of the beginning. Because the beginning has a specific sequence that matters for the quality of the first day. The sequence begins with the acquisition. The tool is the foundation tool of the concentrated period. The daily 8-minute neural sync technology session is the first act of each day of the concentrated period. Before the concentrated period can begin in the full architecture that produces the exponential compounding restoration, the foundation tool needs to be in the hands of the chosen one who is beginning. The path to the acquisition is in the description of this message. The link leads to the page where the Genius Switch is available at the specific price of $39, which is the current offer price that reflects the urgent provision nature of the one-day window. The list price is $49. The anchor price, reflecting the value of what the clinical protocol delivers, is $500. The current price of $39 is the specific provision price that was prepared for the one-day window, not a promotional discount. The specific price that positions the acquisition within the practical reach of the chosen one who is in the test season and who may be experiencing the resource constraints of the test season alongside the calling constraints. The acquisition also includes the 100% money-back guarantee. Dr. Barone stands behind the clinical protocol with the full confidence of 20 years of clinical observation. The chosen one who begins the concentrated period and who does not experience the measurable interior qualities at the markers I described, the lightning at day 7, the signal sharpening and reception quality at day 14, and the vision clarity at day 21, is covered by the guarantee. The guarantee is not a marketing mechanism. It is the clinical confidence of the researcher who knows what the protocol produces when the chosen one commits to the daily 33-minute window. The 4 free bonuses that come with the tool are specific to the architecture of the concentrated period, not generic wellness materials. Specific tools that address the 4 levels of the gap at greater depth than the daily 33-minute window alone can reach. The bonuses extend the protocol into dimensions of the concentrated period that the daily window is the foundation for, but that the specific bonus tools address in their particular depth. I will not detail each bonus in this section because they are detailed on the page that the description link leads to, but I want to name the value of the 4 bonuses in the context of the 1-day window. The chosen one who receives the full provision of the tool and the 4 bonuses has in their hands the complete architecture of the concentrated period, not the foundation tool alone, the full architecture, the compass recalibration tools, the DABA discipline framework, the backlog clearance protocol, the activation level practice, all 4 levels, all specific to the test season configuration of the chosen one who is in the window. The counterfeit concern is real and I need to address it directly. The neural sync technology of the Genius Switch is not available through YouTube or Spotify or any streaming platform. It is specifically calibrated for the acquisition through the description link. The audio versions of frequency layering content that circulate through streaming platforms have not been developed to the clinical specification that Dr. Barone calibrated over 20 years of clinical observation. They may carry similar vocabulary, similar claims, similar audio presentations. But the clinical calibration of the frequency layering that produces the synchronized coherence threshold is specific to the Genius Switch. The description link is the only path to the clinically calibrated provision. This is not a scarcity claim designed to produce urgency. It is the accurate description of the clinical specificity of the protocol. The chosen one, who has been in the adjusted carrier mode for the duration of the test season, deserves the clinically calibrated tool rather than the uncalibrated versions that carry similar vocabulary but different specifications. The difference between the clinically calibrated tool and the uncalibrated imitation is the difference between the protocol that produces the measurable interior qualities at the specific markers and the experience that produces generic relaxation or general wellness benefit. The markers require the calibration. Let me speak to the interior posture that the acquisition requires. Because the chosen one who is in the 1-day window and who has made the interior choice of the first yes, and who is positioned at the threshold of the beginning, may notice the management mode, making a last assessment at the moment of the acquisition. The last assessment is the management mode doing what the management mode is designed to do. It is evaluating the practical dimensions of the acquisition, the price, the guarantee, the credibility of the researcher, the legitimacy of the protocol. These are valid evaluations, and the practical information is available on the page that the description link leads to. But there is a specific quality of the interior that the management mode assessment at the moment of acquisition will not be able to evaluate. It is the same quality that the management mode could not evaluate at the moment of the 1-day window. The interior alignment quality, the specific quality of the interior that knows, in the cellular way that precedes the analytical processing, that this is the specific provision for the specific gap. That cellular knowing is the quality that the management mode cannot evaluate, because it does not operate at the depth where the cellular knowing lives. The management mode evaluation of the practical dimensions is appropriate. Let it complete, and then let the cellular knowing govern the final response. The cellular knowing is the interior intelligence of the full activation receiving posture. It was present at the beginning of the 1-day window reception. It is present at the moment of the acquisition. And it is the specific interior intelligence that the one-day window has been opening toward its full expression throughout this message. The chosen one, who acts from the cellular knowing at the moment of acquisition, is not bypassing the practical evaluation. They are allowing the practical evaluation to complete and then allowing the deeper intelligence to govern the final response. That ordering, the practical evaluation completing, and then the deeper intelligence governing, is the ordering of the aligned interior. The management mode would reverse the ordering. The management mode would allow the practical evaluation to govern and would subordinate the deeper intelligence to the practical evaluation outcome. The one-day window has been building toward the restoration of the correct ordering. The acquisition is the first concrete act of the restored ordering. The beginning is the first concrete act, not the only concrete act, not the dramatic act, the first act. The link in the description is the path to the beginning. The beginning is today. The window is right now, in the specific quality of alignment that the test season, preparation, and the one-day window have produced in your interior at this exact moment. God does not send the urgency of the one-day window without sending the provision for the concentrated period that the urgency is calling the chosen one to begin. The provision is here. The path to the provision is in the description, and the interior that is in the window right now, the interior that has been following this message with the specific quality of the elevated listening, is the interior that the provision was prepared for. The alignment is complete, the beginning is available, and the act of beginning is the act that the one-day window is calling the chosen one to. I want to speak to one more dimension of the one-day window before the sacred closing of this section, the dimension that belongs specifically to the chosen one who has been in the window before and who recognized the window and did not take the full depth response, and who is now in the window again with the specific quality of the second or third alignment moment. For that chosen one, there is a specific interior quality that accompanies the current window that is different from the quality of the first window. The quality is the weight of the recognition. The interior that recognizes the pattern of the window, that knows the specific quality of the interior readiness and the cellular knowing and the elevated listening quality, and that also carries the memory of the previous windows where the management mode reassertion produced the progressive closing without the full depth response, carries a heavier quality of the current reception. Not heavier in the sense of burdensome, heavier in the sense of more weighty, more consequential. The weight of the recognition is the weight of the interior that knows what the pattern of the missed window produces, not the judgment of the missed window. The specific interior knowledge of the cost of the management mode reassertion. The chosen one who has lived through the progressive closing of previous windows knows in a way that the chosen one receiving their first window does not know the specific interior cost of the window closing without the full depth response. That specific knowledge is present in the weight of the recognition, and the weight of the recognition held in the interior of the chosen one who is in the window for the second or third time is the specific interior preparation for the current reception, not the weight of the condemnation, the weight of the learning. The interior that carries the weight of the learning is the interior that is most specifically prepared to receive the word of the one-day window at full depth, because it is the interior that knows most specifically what the alternative costs. The management mode reassertion is not an abstract alternative for the chosen one who has lived through previous windows. It is a known interior experience, and the known cost of the known alternative sharpens the quality of the current reception in a way that the first-time window cannot produce. If you are receiving this message as your second or third window, the specific weight of the recognition is not a burden to be managed. It is the specific interior preparation that your history of the window has produced. The chosen one, who has been through previous windows and who is in the window again, carries the learning of the previous passages in a way that makes the current window more fully receivable than the first. Not more comfortable, more receivable. The full depth of the cellular knowing is available with more clarity because the history of the pattern has clarified the interior conditions of the window. The recognition is more precise. The cellular knowing is more specific. The choice of the priority of the first yes is more informed. God does not waste the previous windows. The interior that did not take the full depth response in the previous window is not behind. It is building the specific interior capacity that the accumulated windows produce. Each window, whether received at full depth or not, adds to the interior the specific quality of the window experience. The recognition, the cellular knowing, the weight of the learning. These are all interior acquisitions of the window. And the interior that has accumulated multiple window experiences arrives at the current window with the specific readiness that the accumulated acquisitions have produced. The current window, for the chosen one who has been through previous windows, is the specific window for which all the previous window experiences have been building the readiness. Not in a sequential inevitability that removes the choice, in the specific preparation that makes the full depth response most available right now. The interior is ready in a specific way that the first window interior was not ready. The cellular knowing is clearer. The weight of the learning is present. The recognition is precise. And the provision is here. The urgency of the one-day window for the chosen one who has been through previous windows is the urgency of the accumulated readiness. The interior has been building toward this specific reception across the accumulated window experiences. The current window is the specific window that the accumulation was building toward, not the final window in a theological sense. The current window in the specific sense of the interior that has been prepared by the accumulation, and that is ready to receive at the full depth that the accumulation has made possible. Let me speak to the product testimonial that is most specific to the chosen one in their second or third window, because among the three accounts I shared in the previous section, Ellie is the one who was most specifically in her second window when she received the concentrated period word. She had encountered the visibility threshold before the concentrated period. She had recognized the generational pattern before the concentrated period. She had received interior signals about the threshold before the concentrated period. But the management mode reassertion had progressively closed the previous windows without the full depth response. When Ellie received the one-day window that led to the concentrated period, she was in her second full alignment moment with the visibility threshold invitation, and the weight of the recognition was specifically present in her reception. She described it as knowing exactly what the message was saying before it said it. The pattern was familiar, the conditions were familiar, the cellular knowing was immediate, and the weight of the previous window experience was present in the quality of the current reception. What was different for Ellie in the second window was the precision of the provision. The first window had produced the recognition and the cellular knowing, but the provision that matched the gap with the specific path through it had not been as clearly identified in the first window. The tool and the concentrated period protocol were the specific provision that named the generational pattern dimension of the gap in the terms that the interior recognized. The Dabar discipline was the specific tool for the category sorting that the generational pattern had disrupted. The backlog clearance protocol was the specific tool for the visibility threshold signals that had been accumulating in the backlog. The precision of the provision made the second window different from the first. The first window had produced the cellular knowing without the specific path. The second window produced the cellular knowing with the specific path, and the combination of the cellular knowing and the specific path was the specific interior condition that allowed the choice of the first yes to govern the response, without the management mode reassertion, producing the progressive window. Closing. That is the architecture of the second window. The cellular knowing from the first window experience, combined with the specific provision that names the gap and the path simultaneously, produces the interior condition in which the choice of the first yes is most fully available. Not automatically available. Most fully available. The choice is still required. The management mode is still present. But the combination of the accumulated cellular knowing and the specific provision reduces the management mode reassertion to a manageable level that allows the choice of the first yes to govern without requiring the extraordinary interior effort that the first window required. The chosen one who is in their second or third window is not in a worse position than the chosen one who is receiving their first window. They are in the specifically prepared position that the accumulated window experiences have built. The recognition is sharper. The cellular knowing is clearer. The weight of the learning is present, and the provision is specific to the gap that the windows have been identifying. The second window is not the consolation prize. It is the specific window that the accumulation was building toward. There is a question that sometimes arises in the interior of the chosen one who is at the threshold of the beginning and who has been receiving the word of the one-day window at the depth I have been describing. The question is whether there will be another window. Whether, if the beginning does not happen today, the provision will still be available and another aligned moment will present itself at a future day. I want to address that question honestly and specifically. The provision will still be available. The tool does not disappear from the path when the one-day window closes. The protocol does not become inaccessible. The concentrated period can begin on any day. I want to be honest about that. I am not building a false urgency by suggesting that the provision will be withdrawn if the beginning does not happen today. What will change is the interior quality of the beginning, the aligned moment of the one-day window, the specific alignment of the interior readiness and the provision availability and the appointing of the day produces a specific quality of the beginning that is qualitatively different from the beginning that happens after the window has closed. The beginning in the window happens from the full activation receiving posture that the window produces. The beginning after the window has closed happens from the adjusted carrier interior that has allowed the management mode to reassert after the window. The beginning in the window has the cellular knowing of the alignment at full depth. The beginning after the window has the analytical decision of the management mode at surface depth. Both beginnings can produce the concentrated period. But the concentrated period that begins in the window, from the full activation receiving posture, from the cellular knowing of the alignment, begins at a qualitatively different interior depth than the concentrated period that begins from the management mode decision after the window has closed. And the interior depth of the beginning determines the interior depth of the daily renewal of the permission throughout the 21-day concentrated period. The chosen one who began from the window cellular knowing renews the permission from the memory of the cellular knowing. The chosen one who began from the management mode decision renews the permission from the analytical framework of the management mode decision. Both can complete the concentrated period, but the experience of the concentrated period, the quality of the daily renewal, the quality of the first lightning, the quality of the signal sharpening, and the reception restoration is qualitatively richer for the chosen one who began in the window. There is a dimension of the one-day window that I have been building toward throughout this entire message, and that I want to name directly in this section. The dimension is the dimension of the preparation for the arriving move, not the arriving move itself. The preparation for it. Because the chosen one in the window is not simply being invited to a 21-day interior journey, they are being positioned for what the 21-day journey prepares them to receive. Let me speak to the nature of the arriving move, not in the abstract theological language of the general spiritual teaching, in the specific interior terms that the chosen one who has been following this message can receive with the precision it requires. The arriving move is the specific external alignment that corresponds to the interior alignment that the concentrated period produces. The interior alignment is the preparation. The arriving move is the corresponding external alignment that God has been preparing simultaneously. The test season built the interior. While the interior was being built, the external alignment was also being constructed. The two preparations, the interior and the external, are designed to meet at the threshold that the concentrated period positions the chosen one at. This is why the 21-day concentrated period has a specific destination. The destination is not the general interior improvement of the wellness journey. It is the specific interior threshold that corresponds to the specific external alignment that was being prepared simultaneously. The 21 days do not produce the arriving move. They position the interior at the threshold that the arriving move was designed to land in. The arriving move lands. The prepared interior receives it at the full depth that the preparation produced. The chosen one who has been asking God for the arriving move throughout the test season needs to hear this specific message with full clarity. The arriving move has not been delayed because God forgot. It has not been delayed because the promise was wrong. It has not been delayed because the chosen one was insufficient. The arriving move has been in its own preparation sequence that is external to the interior of the chosen one. While the interior was being prepared through the test season, the arriving move was being prepared through the sequence of external alignments that God was arranging. The two sequences are coordinated. The interior preparation and the external preparation are designed to complete at the same threshold. The one-day window is the signal that both preparations are approaching completion simultaneously. The interior readiness is the evidence that the interior preparation is at the threshold, and the specific placement of the provision, the tool, and the concentrated period protocol in the path of the chosen one at this exact moment is the evidence that the external preparation is also approaching the same threshold. The one-day window is not the arriving move. It is the signal of the coordinated approach of both preparations to the threshold. This is why the urgency of the one-day window is not the urgency of the emergency. It is the urgency of the alignment. Both preparations are approaching the threshold. The interior preparation belongs to the chosen one. The external preparation belongs to God. Both are approaching the threshold that was designed for their meeting. The one-day window is the announcement of the approach. The concentrated period is the completion of the interior preparation, and the completion of the interior preparation is the specific condition that positions the chosen one at the threshold where the arriving move lands. The chosen one who begins the concentrated period today is not initiating the arriving move. They are completing their preparation for it. The arriving move is in its own sequence. It will arrive when the coordinated preparations have both reached the threshold. The concentrated period is the chosen one doing their part of the preparation. The arriving move is God doing his part. The window is the announcement that both parts are approaching completion. I want to speak to the specific interior quality that the arriving move produces when it lands in the prepared interior. Because the chosen one who has been in the adjusted carrier mode for the duration of the test season may have an interior image of the arriving move that was generated by the adjusted carrier imagination. The adjusted carrier imagination generates images of the arriving move from the surface level of the management mode. The surface level image is often dramatic, sudden, unmistakable, complete. The kind of arriving move that resolves the gap in the clear and undeniable way that the adjusted carrier management has been hoping for throughout the test season. The actual arriving move, when it lands in the prepared interior of the concentrated period completion, does not typically have the dramatic surface quality that the adjusted carrier imagination generated. It has a different quality, the quality of the thing that was prepared and that arrives in the prepared vessel. Not the explosion, the arrival. The specific, concrete, directional arrival of the thing that was prepared for this interior, in this calling, at this threshold. It carries weight, it carries direction. It carries the clarity that the vision clarity restoration of day 21 positioned the interior to receive. But it does not typically arrive with the dramatic quality that the adjusted carrier imagination generated. The prepared interior recognizes the arriving move by its interior quality rather than its surface drama. The cellular knowing that was present in the one-day window is the same quality of the cellular knowing that recognizes the arriving move when it lands. The deep interior recognition before the analytical processing, the knowing that this is the specific thing that was prepared, the recognition that precedes and grounds the analytical understanding that follows. The adjusted carrier imagination, when the arriving move arrives without the surface drama, sometimes fails to recognize it. The management mode is oriented toward the surface evidence, the dramatic, the unmistakable, the complete. When the arriving move arrives with the interior quality rather than the surface drama, the management mode may evaluate it and conclude that it is not the arriving move. The prepared interior, with the whole brain coherence of the concentrated period completion, recognizes the arriving move by the cellular quality rather than by the surface drama. This is another dimension of why the concentrated period preparation matters. The prepared interior will recognize the arriving move when it arrives. The unprepared adjusted carrier interior may not recognize it because the recognition requires the whole brain coherence of the full activation receiving posture rather than the surface evidence evaluation of the management mode. She described the arriving move that came after her concentrated period completion as something that arrived quietly. She said, "I expected something big. What came was specific. It was not loud. It was not dramatic, but it was the specific thing I had been waiting for, and I knew it the moment it arrived. Not because it matched my imagination of it. Because the interior knew it in the way the interior knows things at depth. I had not had that quality of knowing for 2 years. The concentrated period gave it back to me, and when the arriving thing came, I recognized it by that quality. If I had not had the concentrated period, I am not sure I would have recognized it when it arrived." That account is the specific testimony of the prepared interior receiving the arriving move, not the dramatic testimony of the sudden reversal. The specific testimony of the interior that was prepared to recognize and receive the arriving move by its interior quality rather than its surface drama. And the recognition, when it comes, is not a performance. It is the interior homecoming of the thing that was prepared and that arrives in the interior that was prepared for it. God has been preparing both the arriving move and the interior for the arriving move throughout the test season. The test season was not the delay of the arriving move. It was the preparation of the interior for the arriving move. The concentrated period is the completion of the interior preparation, and the arriving move is the completion of the external preparation. When both preparations complete at the threshold, the interior homecoming occurs. The message of the one-day window is the announcement of the approaching completion of both preparations. The interior preparation is within 21 days of its completion. The external preparation is at the threshold of its completion. God is saying, through the one-day window, that the test season is complete and that the concentrated period is the final act of the interior preparation, and that the arriving move is at the threshold of the external preparation completion. All that remains is the completion of the interior preparation through the 21-day concentrated period. That is the architecture of the one-day window, not the threat, not the emergency. The announcement of the coordinated completion of two preparations, the interior and the external, both approaching the threshold. The one-day window is the specific moment when the announcement of the approaching completion lands in the prepared interior of the chosen one who has been in the test season, and the window is the invitation to complete the interior preparation with the specific protocol that was prepared for exactly this configuration of the gap and exactly this threshold of the arriving move. The link in the description is the path to the beginning of the completion of the interior preparation. The tool at $39 with the 100% money-back guarantee and the 4 free bonuses is the specific provision that was placed in the path of the chosen one at the one-day window for the specific purpose of making the beginning of the interior preparation, completion, accessible and available today. Not someday, today, in the window, at the alignment moment. The chosen one, who acts on the cellular knowing of the one-day window and begins the concentrated period today, is doing the specific thing that the test season was building toward and that the one-day window is announcing. They are completing the interior preparation. They are positioning the interior at the threshold, and they are preparing the vessel for the interior homecoming of the arriving move that was prepared for this interior, this calling, this threshold. The tool does not replace the formation that the test season built. It does not replace the interior work of the compass recalibration, the DeBar discipline, or the backlog clearance. It does not carry the chosen one past the obedience the calling requires. What it does is restore the neurological foundation that makes the interior work accessible at the depth the preparation deserves, so that the full person, the full spirit, and the full brain together is available for the arriving move. There is one more thing I want to say before we move to the sacred closing of this message, and it is the thing that I have been building toward since the beginning of the first section. God knows where you are. Not in the general theological affirmation, in the specific interior daily experience sense. God knows the quality of the gap. God knows the primary deficit. God knows the configuration of the adjusted carrier mode that the test season produced in your specific interior. God knows the timeline of the carrying. God knows the weight of the carrying past the estimated timeline. God knows the specific quality of the cellular knowing that has been present throughout the test season in the moments when the window was open. And God prepared the specific provision for the specific gap, not the generic provision for the generic chosen one in the generic test season, the specific provision for your specific gap, the specific tool for your specific neurological suppression, the specific protocol for your specific interior configuration, the specific window at the specific moment when both the interior preparation and the external preparation are approaching the threshold simultaneously. That specific knowing and the specific provision it produced is the word that the one-day window is delivering. God sees you. God has prepared for you. The provision is here. The window is open. The threshold is within 21 days of the beginning, and the beginning is available to you right now, today, through the link in the description. Let me spend a moment more on the nature of what it means to be seen by God in the specific way that the one-day window communicates. Because the chosen one, who has been in the adjusted carrier mode for the extended test season, sometimes develops a specific interior distance from the felt reality of being specifically known. The general theological truth of divine omniscience is held, but the felt interior reality of the specific daily knowing, the God who knows the quality of this specific morning interior, the God who knows the configuration of this specific adjusted carrier mode, the God who placed this specific provision in the path at this specific window alignment, that interior felt reality can fade in the extended test season. The fading of the felt interior reality of the specific knowing is not the fading of the theological truth. The truth holds. But the felt interior experience of the truth is a different quality from the intellectual affirmation of the truth. The adjusted carrier mode, with its management orientation and its reduced receiving depth, is particularly prone to holding the truth intellectually, while the felt interior experience of the truth has faded to the level of the acknowledged background. The truth is in the background, the management is in the foreground, and the felt quality of being specifically known is in the background with the truth. The one-day window is the specific moment when the felt interior reality of the specific knowing breaks through the management foreground and lands at the depth where the adjusted carrier protection was keeping it from landing. The message that names your specific interior conditions with the precision that this message has been naming them is the specific mechanism of the breakthrough. The interior that hears its specific conditions named with accuracy experiences the felt reality of the specific knowing in a way that the general theological affirmation does not produce. That is what is happening in the interior of the chosen one who is receiving this message with the elevated listening quality of the one-day window. The felt interior reality of the specific knowing is landing not as an emotional performance, as the actual interior experience of the truth that the adjusted carrier management was keeping at the background level. The specific knowing is landing at the depth where it was prepared to land. Because the window is open and the interior is in the elevated receptive state, and the protection has been reduced enough by the accumulation of the window conditions to allow the full depth landing. Let that land. Let the specific knowing land at the full depth of the interior, not just the intellectual affirmation that God knows your conditions. The felt interior experience of the God who prepared the specific provision for the specific gap, who placed it in your path at the specific moment of the one-day window, who sent this specific message to find you at the specific interior state that makes the full depth reception possible. That specific knowing is the word that was sent for this window. Let it land at the depth it was prepared for. There is a specific quality of the test season that has not yet been named in this message, and that belongs in this section before the sacred closing. The quality is the quality of the interior faithfulness. The chosen one who has been in the test season for the extended period has been doing something in the interior that the management mode and the adjusted carrier language do not fully capture. They have been faithful. In the specific interior sense of the word that goes beyond the behavioral definition, the interior faithfulness of the extended test season is the specific quality of the chosen one who continued to hold the calling in the interior when the observable evidence for the calling was not matching the interior knowing, who continued to bring the calling to the interior at the depth of the morning prayer, even when the morning prayer had been in the reduced receiving depth of the adjusted carrier mode for weeks or months or years, who continued to take the small acts of the calling, even when the small acts were not producing the observable progress that the sequential logic of the left hemisphere generated as the expected result. That interior faithfulness is not invisible to God. The theological truth of this is simple and well established. But the felt interior reality of it is another matter for the chosen one who has been in the adjusted carrier mode. The management orientation of the adjusted carrier tends to evaluate the interior faithfulness in the same way it evaluates all interior activity, by the observable outcome. And the observable outcome of the interior faithfulness in the extended test season has not been producing the dramatic confirmations that the management mode uses to validate the faithfulness. The one-day window is, among other things, the specific felt interior experience of the validation of the interior faithfulness. The specific God who prepared the specific provision for the specific gap and placed it in the path at the specific window alignment has been watching the specific interior faithfulness throughout the specific test season. The one-day window is the moment when the felt interior experience of that watching lands in the interior of the chosen one who has been faithful in the specific interior sense of the word. Not as a dramatic affirmation, as the specific quality of the provision meeting the specific interior that has been holding the calling throughout the test season. The provision was prepared for this interior, not the generic interior of the chosen one archetype, the specific interior that has been carrying this specific calling through this specific test season with this specific quality of the interior faithfulness. The provision knows the interior it was prepared for, and the interior that receives the provision recognizes the specific knowing of the provision in the cellular quality that precedes the analytical processing. That is another dimension of the cellular knowing of the one-day window. The cellular recognition is not only the recognition of the provision matching the gap, it is the cellular recognition of being specifically known, of the provision arriving from the source that knows the specific interior that has been carrying the calling in the interior faithfulness of the extended test season. The provision carries the evidence of the specific knowing, and the interior receives the evidence in the cellular quality of the recognition. Let me speak to what comes after the 21-day concentrated period in the dimension of the arriving move. Because the chosen one in the one-day window is not simply preparing for a 21-day interior journey. They are preparing for the season that follows the 21-day completion. And the season that follows has a specific quality that the test season interior, in the adjusted carrier mode, cannot fully anticipate. The season that follows the 21-day concentrated period is the season of the aligned interior, engaging the calling from the full activation, receiving posture, not the season of the dramatic arrival of everything that was missing in the test season. The season of the engaged interior. The interior that has the structural depth of the test season and the neurological coherence of the concentrated period completion, engaging the daily work of the calling from the full activation, receiving posture. That engagement is qualitatively different from both the original calling engagement and the adjusted carrier engagement. The original calling engagement was the engagement of the fresh interior, alive with the reception, full of the specific vision that the calling produced, but not yet carrying the structural depth of the test season. The original engagement was wide, but not deep. The calling was clear, but the interior did not yet have the weight of the carrying that the test season builds. The vision was sharp, but the authority that comes from the valley was not yet present. The original engagement was the engagement of the beginning, beautiful, real, necessary, but not the engagement of the post-test season interior. The adjusted carrier engagement is the engagement of the managed interior. The calling is present, but it is managed rather than received. The daily work of the calling is done from the management orientation rather than the full activation receiving orientation. Progress happens, but at the reduced rate of the managed engagement. The vision is present but blurred by the management overlay. The authority is present but unexpressed because the management mode is not the mode of the full authority expression. The adjusted carrier engagement is the engagement of the sustained carrying, faithful, costly, necessary, but not the engagement that the test season was building toward. The post-concentrated period engagement is the engagement of the prepared interior, the structural depth of the test season expressed through the neurological coherence of the whole brain activation state. The authority of the valley expressed through the full activation receiving posture. The compassion of the carrying expressed through the aligned interior that has restored the depth of the receiving. The vision of the calling expressed at the resolution that the day 21 vision clarity restoration produced. That is the quality of the post-concentrated period engagement, not the flash of the dramatic reversal. The sustained, deepened, structurally grounded engagement of the interior that was prepared by the test season and restored by the concentrated period. The engagement that the calling was designed for. The engagement that the arriving move was prepared to land in. The engagement that the test season interior, in the adjusted carrier mode, could not fully anticipate because the adjusted carrier mode does not have access to the full picture of what the prepared interior engagement feels like. The chosen one in the one-day window is 21 days from that engagement, not 21 days from the completion of everything that was missing in the test season. 21 days from the interior that is positioned for the full engagement of the calling at the depth and quality that the preparation has been building toward. 21 days from the interior that recognizes the arriving move when it arrives. 21 days from the interior that receives the specific provision of God at the cellular depth that the management mode was preventing. That is the specific destination of the 21-day concentrated period. The interior that is positioned for the post-concentrated period engagement, not the perfect interior, the prepared interior. The interior that carries the test season and has been restored to the full activation receiving posture, and that is positioned at the threshold that the arriving move was designed to meet. The link in the description leads to the tool, the $39 entry point, the 100% money-back guarantee, the 4 free bonuses. The specific provision for the specific gap of the chosen one who is in the one-day window and who is 21 days from the interior that was being built throughout the test season. Not available on YouTube, not available on Spotify, not available through the streaming platforms that carry similar vocabulary but uncalibrated specifications, only through the link in the description. The clinically calibrated neural sync technology of Dr. Daniel Barone, the foundation tool of the concentrated period, the beginning of the 21-day completion of the interior preparation. Before the sacred closing of this section, I want to speak to the chosen one who has been following this message and who has received it at the depth that the one-day window produces, and who is at the threshold of the beginning, and who has one more interior object in the path of the full reception, the object of the worthiness question. The worthiness question is the specific interior question that the adjusted carrier posture sometimes presents at the threshold of the beginning. It is not framed as a worthiness question. It is framed as a practical question, or a timing question, or a priority question. But at the interior level below the framing, it is the worthiness question. The management mode asking whether this interior, this specific interior, with this specific gap, and this specific configuration of the adjusted carrier mode, deserves the full provision of the arriving move and the concentrated period completion. I want to answer the worthiness question directly. The concentrated period is not the reward for the worthy interior. It is the specific provision for the specific gap. The gap is not the evidence of the unworthiness. The gap is the evidence of the honest conditions of the test season and the interior faithfulness that has been carrying the calling through those conditions. The provision was not prepared for the interior without a gap. It was prepared for the interior with the specific gap. The specific interior that needs the provision is the specific interior that the provision was prepared for. The worthiness question is the management mode, protecting the interior from the vulnerability of the full reception by raising the bar of the qualification to a level that the adjusted carrier interior cannot meet. Because the adjusted carrier management mode knows that if the worthiness bar is raised above the current interior level, the full reception can be indefinitely deferred. The one-day window resolves the worthiness question not by evaluating the worthiness of the interior, but by demonstrating the specificity of the provision for the specific gap. The provision that was prepared for the specific gap is the answer to the worthiness question, not the affirmation of the worthiness in the management mode terms. The demonstration that the provision was prepared for this specific interior in this specific condition, the worthiness question asks whether this interior deserves the provision. The provision answers by demonstrating that it was specifically prepared for this interior. The preparation is the specific demonstration of the specific valuing of the specific interior, not in spite of the gap, because of the gap. The gap is the specific condition that the provision was specifically prepared for. Receive the provision. The worthiness question has been answered by the specific preparation. The interior that has been carrying the calling throughout the test season, in the interior faithfulness I described, is the specific interior that the provision was prepared for. The beginning is available. The window is open. The threshold is 21 days from the beginning. And the interior that begins today is the interior that was specifically prepared for the provision and for which the provision was specifically prepared. This is the sacred closing of the message of the one-day window. The chosen one, who has followed this message from the first section to this final section, has made an interior journey that mirrors the architecture of the one-day window itself. They began with the recognition of the 5 conditions. They received the word of the completed preparation. They understood the architecture of the 21-day concentrated period and the specific 4 interior qualities that the journey produces at the specific markers. They heard the interior accounts of Lisa and Matthew and Ellie. They understood the nature of the arriving move and the preparation for the receiving. They answered the worthiness question with the demonstration of the specific provision for the specific gap. And they reached the sacred closing with the specific interior state that the message was designed to produce. The interior state that the sacred closing addresses is the interior state of the threshold. The chosen one who has received this message at the depth that the one-day window allows is at the threshold of the beginning. The threshold is not the beginning itself. It is the specific interior position immediately before the beginning, the position of the interior that has said yes, and that is at the moment before the first concrete act. The threshold is where the sacred closing lives, not because the threshold is the destination, because the threshold is the specific interior condition that requires the specific sacred closing practice in order to complete the interior preparation for the beginning. The sacred closing is not the end of the message. It is the prep. The first movement of the sacred closing is the grateful acknowledgement. The chosen one at the threshold acknowledges the specific path that brought them to this moment, not the generic gratitude of the spiritual practice. The specific acknowledgement of the specific journey, the test season, the weight of the carrying, the interior faithfulness, the specific alignment of the conditions that produced the one-day window, the specific provision that was placed in the path, the specific message that found them at the specific interior state of the open window. That specific path, with all of its conditions and all of its qualities, was the specific path that was prepared for this interior and this calling and this threshold. Not the easy path, the specific path. The chosen one acknowledges the specific path, not in the performance of gratitude, but in the honest interior recognition that the path was specific and purposeful, and that the threshold is the evidence of the path having been walked through to its appointed destination. The grateful acknowledgement includes the specific acknowledgement of the interior faithfulness I described in the previous section. The chosen one acknowledges to the interior, in the honest and direct language of the daily experience, that the carrying was real, and that the faithfulness was real, and that the God who was watching the faithfulness prepared the specific provision for the specific gap. That acknowledgement is the completion of the interior circle that the test season opened, and that the one-day window has been closing throughout this message. Let the acknowledgement be complete. Let it include the specific weight of the test season. Let it include the specific quality of the interior faithfulness. Let it include the specific relief of the provision arriving at the moment when the window is fully open. And let it include the specific forward quality of the threshold, the interior knowing that the beginning is the next act, and that the beginning is what the acknowledgement has been building toward. The second movement of the sacred closing is the release of the adjusted carrier posture, not the dramatic dismantling. The specific and intentional interior release of the management orientation that the test season produced. The chosen one at the threshold has been in the adjusted carrier posture for the duration of the test season. The management mode has been the primary interior orientation. The release of the management orientation is the specific act that the threshold requires before the beginning. The release does not happen by force. The interior cannot force the release of the management mode by deciding to release it. The management mode does not respond to the force of the decision. It releases in response to the safety of the simultaneous provision. And the provision is simultaneously present at the threshold. The tool, the concentrated period protocol, the 33-minute daily window, the 21-day journey with the specific markers at the specific intervals, the 100% money-back guarantee, the 4 free bonuses. The full architecture of the gap closure is present at the threshold. The interior release of the adjusted carrier posture happens in response to the safety of the simultaneous provision. The management mode asks, if I release the management, what will manage the gap? The provision answers. The tool manages the activation level. The compass recalibration manages the depth level. The Dabar discipline manages the alignment level. The backlog clearance protocol manages the listening level. The provision manages all 4 levels. The management mode does not need to manage them. The provision was prepared to manage them. Let the release happen in response to that answer, not the complete and permanent release in a single act. The specific release of today for the beginning of today. The release of the management posture for the 33 minutes of the first day. The release of the management orientation for the act of the acquisition. The specific and limited release that the beginning requires. The beginning does not require the permanent dismantling of the management mode. It requires the specific release of today that allows the first act to be the first act. The third movement of the sacred closing is the declaration. The declaration of the one-day window is the specific interior statement that the chosen one makes from the threshold, not the vow of the dramatic commitment. The simple, interior, honest declaration of the choice of the first yes. Speak this in the interior, not in the performance language of the spiritual practice, in the honest language of the direct interior experience. I am in the window. I have heard the word. I have received the provision. The beginning is available. I am choosing the first yes as the prior voice of this interior today. I am releasing the management orientation for the act of the beginning. I am completing my interior preparation for the arriving move. And I am beginning today. That declaration is the interior act of the beginning, not the acquisition itself. The acquisition follows the declaration, but the declaration is the interior act that precedes and governs the acquisition. The interior that makes the declaration from the full depth of the threshold is the interior that acquires from the cellular knowing rather than from the management mode decision. And the acquisition from the cellular knowing is the beginning that carries the specific quality of the aligned interior into the first day of the concentrated period. The quiet seal follows the declaration. The interior goes still after the declaration. The stillness is not the emptiness of the post-decision void. The stillness of the interior that has declared from the full depth and that is holding the declaration in the specific quiet of the aligned interior, not the stillness of the waiting. The stillness of the having arrived at the threshold and the being at the threshold in the full interior presence. The stillness of the beginning before the first act. Hold the quiet seal for the 30 seconds of the sacred closing before the act. Let the declaration settle into the interior in the stillness. Let the specific quality of the threshold interior be the interior from which the first act proceeds. The first act is the link in the description, the acquisition, the beginning, the first day of the 33-minute daily window, the first act of the completion of the interior preparation. God prepared the one-day window for this interior. The provision was prepared for this gap. The threshold is here. The beginning is available. And the chosen one who acts from the cellular knowing of the aligned interior at the threshold is beginning the 21-day journey that the test season was preparing them for throughout its entire duration. Not someday, today. In the window. At the threshold. From the full interior presence of the sacred closing, the link in the description is the path to the tool. $39. 100% money-back guarantee, 4 free bonuses, not on YouTube, not on Spotify, only through the link in the description. The specific provision for the specific gap of the chosen one who is in the one-day window right now. If this message found you at the depth that the one-day window produces, leave the comment below. Say, "I am ready for everything that was prepared." That comment is the exterior declaration that corresponds to the interior declaration of the sacred closing. The community of the chosen ones who are in the window on this day sees your declaration. And the interior that makes the exterior declaration from the full depth of the threshold is the interior that carries the declaration into the first day of the concentrated period. Share this message with the chosen one who is in the window and who does not yet know that the window is open. Not the general sharing of the spiritual content. The specific sharing with the specific person whose interior you know is in the adjusted carrier mode and who has been in the test season and who needs the specific word of the one-day window at the specific interior state that makes the full depth reception possible. That person exists in your network. God knows who they are. The interior knows who they are. Share this message with that person today. The window is a gift. The sharing of the window is the gift passing through your hands into the interior of the person who is also in the window and who needs to know that the window is open. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell. This channel carries messages that are designed to find the chosen one at the specific interior state that the message was prepared for. Not every message will find every chosen one at the same depth, but the chosen one who has been found at this depth today by this message will be found again at a comparable depth by a future message that is also designed to meet the specific conditions of that future interior state. The notification bell ensures that the future message finds the interior before the window closes. Before the final blessing of this message, I want to say one last thing to the chosen one who is at the threshold. The test season is over, not in the dramatic external sense of the reversal of every external condition that the test season produced. In the interior sense, that is more fundamental than the external. The test season fulfilled its purpose. The interior preparation is complete. The structural depth is built. The threshold is here. The provision is present. The window is open. God is saying, through the one-day window, that the season of the carrying past the estimate is complete. The interior preparation is at its threshold. The arriving move is at its approaching completion. And the one-day window is the announcement of the coordinated approach. The chosen one, who receives that word in the full depth of the one-day window, is not the same interior that began this message. The interior that arrived at this message from the adjusted carrier mode carried the weight of the test season at the surface level of the management orientation. The interior that is at the sacred closing of this message is carrying the weight differently. The weight has moved in the specific way that the one-day window produces, not the full lightning. That comes on day 7 of the concentrated period. But the specific quality of the weight that has been touched by the full depth reception of the word of the one-day window, that specific quality is the beginning of the weight shifting, the beginning of the interior preparation completion, the beginning of the 21-day journey to the threshold of the arriving move, and the beginning begins now, today, with the link in the description, and the first day of the 33-minute window, and the first 8 minutes of the Neural Sync Technology daily session. Let me expand on the second movement of the sacred closing, the release of the adjusted carrier posture, because the release has a specific anatomy that is worth naming in full for the chosen one who is at the threshold and who wants to understand what is actually happening in the interior during the release. The adjusted carrier posture was assembled over time, not in a single event. In the progressive accumulation of the management mode, responses to the successive moments of the test season. Each moment when the arriving move did not arrive as estimated, each moment when the interior compass pointed toward a direction and the observable evidence did not confirm the direction. Each moment when the interior faithfulness produced a cost rather than a visible return. Each of those moments added a layer to the adjusted carrier posture. The posture is not a single thing. It is an accumulation. The release of the accumulated adjusted carrier posture does not happen in a single act. The declaration of the sacred closing is the specific act that begins the release. But the release completes progressively over the 21-day concentrated period as the neurological restoration of the whole brain activation state progressively reduces the activation cost of the adjusted carrier posture. The management mode is expensive to maintain at the neurological level. It requires sustained left hemisphere activation at the monitoring and evaluating and adjusting level. As the whole brain coherence restoration of the daily session increases, the cost of maintaining the management mode at the full activation level decreases. And the management mode progressively yields to the lower maintenance cost that the restored coherence makes possible. By day 7, when the lightning arrives, the management mode is operating at a reduced activation level, not gone. Reduced. The lightning is partly the neurological lightning of the reduced management mode activation cost. The interior feels lighter because the sustained left hemisphere effort of the full management mode activation is operating at a reduced level. The weight shifted, as Lisa described it. Not because the external conditions changed, because the internal maintenance cost of the management mode reduced. By day 14, the management mode is at the background advisory level rather than the foreground orientation level. The compass recalibration and the DABA discipline have progressively returned the interior intelligence to the foreground, and the management mode has progressively moved to the background as the interior intelligence takes on more of the orientation function. The interior of day 14 is navigating from the interior intelligence rather than from the management mode. And the navigation from the interior intelligence is qualitatively different from the navigation from the management mode. The management mode navigates by the observable evidence. It takes in what is visible and applies the sequential logic of the left hemisphere to determine the correct response. The interior intelligence navigates by the whole picture. It integrates the observable evidence with the deeper knowing of the right hemisphere in the synchronized coherence of the whole brain activation state. The navigation from the whole picture is both more accurate and less effortful than the navigation from the observable evidence alone. The reduced effort of the whole picture navigation is the specific quality of the day 14 interior that produces the secondary lightening that accompanies the signal sharpening and the reception quality restoration. By day 21, the adjusted carrier posture has been substantially released through the progressive restoration of the 21-day concentrated period. Not completely and permanently released. The patterns that the test season built in the interior are not erased by 21 days, but they are substantially reduced in their activation strength. The interior of day 21 is not managed by the adjusted carrier posture. The adjusted carrier posture is present as a learned pattern that is available for the management of genuinely threatening conditions, but it is no longer the default interior orientation. The default interior orientation of the day 21 interior is the full activation receiving posture, the posture that the adjusted carrier was protecting the interior from having to maintain. That transition from the adjusted carrier default orientation to the full activation receiving posture as the default orientation is the primary interior transformation of the 21-day concentrated period. Not the dramatic spiritual transformation of the single experience, the specific, measured, progressive, neurologically grounded transition from the management default to the receiving default. And the receiving default is the interior orientation that the arriving move was prepared to land in. I want to speak to the specific experience of the first day of the concentrated period because the chosen one who is at the threshold may have an interior image of the first day that does not match the actual quality of what the first day produces. The first day of the 33-minute window does not typically feel dramatic. It feels like the specific, deliberate act of the chosen one who has made the interior declaration of the sacred closing and who is now beginning the first concrete act of the beginning. The 8 minutes of the first session will produce a perceptible interior settling, not the dramatic spiritual experience. The specific neurological settling of the interior that has been in the management orientation and that is receiving the first frequency layering of the coherence restoration. The settling is perceptible. The quality of the interior after the 8 minutes is measurably different from the quality before. Not dramatically different, measurably different. Quieter in the specific way that the reduced management mode activation produces. Slightly more open in the specific way that the first increment of coherence restoration produces. After the 8 minutes, the 25-minute protocol window begins with the compass recalibration. The first compass recalibration of the concentrated period has a specific quality that is different from the subsequent daily recalibrations. It is the first honest assessment of the interior compass in the full interior presence that the declaration of the sacred closing produced. The compass question, where is the interior knowing pointing right now, without the analytical overlay and without the management mode filtering, will produce a specific answer on the first day that carries the weight of the whole message reception. The interior has been hearing the word of the one-day window throughout this message. The first compass recalibration allows the interior to report what it received at the full depth rather than what the management mode filtered. The answer to the first compass recalibration will be more specific than the answers that the adjusted carrier mode produced in the management orientation. Not dramatically more specific, measurably more specific. The interior that has been in the open window state of the one-day window reception has a higher quality of interior knowing available than the interior in the ordinary adjusted carrier state. The first compass answer carries that quality. The Dabar discipline on the first day will identify several items in the acted-upon pile that the interior knows belong in the held category. The first day identification will not be as refined as the day 7 or day 14 identification, but the first day will produce at least one specific item, and often 3 to 5 items, that the interior immediately recognizes as belonging in the held category. The recognition is not the analytical determination. It is the interior intelligence knowing that already knew the category and that is now being given the specific practice through which to sort. The removal of those first items from the daily acted-upon pile, even in the first day, produces a specific quality of interior relief. The management mode was maintaining those items in the acted-upon orientation at a specific neurological cost. The removal of that cost begins immediately in the first day of the Dabar discipline practice, not the full cost removal. The first increment. But the first increment is measurable, and the chosen one who completes the first day of the concentrated period and who notices the specific quality of the interior at the end of the 33 minutes will notice that the interior is different from the interior that entered the 33 minutes. That is the first day. Not the dramatic transformation, the first measurable increment of the direction that the 21-day concentrated period was designed to produce. The direction is confirmed in the first day, and the confirmation of the direction in the first day is the specific interior evidence that carries the chosen one through the subsequent days of the protocol until the lightning arrives on day 7 and provides the first major confirmation marker. The chosen one who completes the first day is already on the path, not on the threshold, on the path. The path has begun. The 21-day journey is underway. And the interior that begins the second day from the memory of the first day direction confirmation is the interior that has made the transition from the threshold to the journey. One more specific encouragement for the chosen one who begins the concentrated period. On day 3 or day 4 of the protocol, the management mode will produce a specific defensive response that is worth naming in advance, so the chosen one recognizes it when it arrives. The defensive response is not the full reassertion of the adjusted carrier posture. It is the specific interior question that the management mode generates when the protocol has been running for enough days to feel real. The question is whether the result will match the expectation. The question arrives on day 3 or 4 because the management mode has allowed the first 2 days to proceed as a trial and is now evaluating whether the trial is producing the outcome that the management mode calculates as sufficient. To continue, the management mode calculates the sufficient outcome by the sequential logic of the observable evidence at day 3 or 4, which is approximately 12 to 16% of the way through the 21-day protocol. The management mode is evaluating whether 12 to 16% of the journey has produced enough observable evidence to continue. The answer to the management mode question at day 3 or 4 is this: the lightning does not arrive until day 7. The management mode is evaluating at day 3 or 4, which is before the first confirmation marker. The evaluation at day 3 or 4 is the evaluation of the protocol before it has reached its first measurable output. The evaluation is premature. The protocol is working. The neurological restoration is progressive and compounding. The first measurable output arrives on day 7. The evaluation at day 3 or 4 cannot see day 7 because the management mode operates at the current observable evidence level. The chosen one who encounters the management mode defensive question at day 3 or 4 is encountering the specific interior test that the threshold of the protocol produces. The test is the specific interior act of the continuing past the premature evaluation, the renewal of the permission, which I described earlier. The declaration that the interior made at the sacred closing governs the response to the day 3 or day 4 evaluation. The interior that made the declaration from the full depth of the threshold has the specific interior resource for the renewal of the permission past the premature evaluation. The resource is the memory of the cellular knowing of the one-day window, the cellular knowing that preceded the analytical evaluation. The deep interior recognition that this was the specific provision for the specific gap. That cellular knowing is not erased by day 3 or 4. It is present in the interior as the specific memory of the quality of the reception. And the renewal of the permission on day 3 or 4 is the act of choosing the cellular knowing of the one-day window over the premature evaluation of the management mode at day 3 or 4. That choice, made on day 3 or 4, carries the concentrated period past the first major interior test. And the interior that makes the choice on day 3 or 4 arrives at day 7 with the specific quality of the having chosen. The lightning on day 7 lands in the interior that chose to continue past the premature evaluation. And the landing of the lightning in the interior that chose carries a specific quality of the confirmation that the interior that did not face the test on day 3 or 4 does not receive. The confirmation is richer because the choosing was real. God bless the chosen one who is at the threshold. God bless the interior that has been carrying the calling throughout the test season in the faithfulness that was seen. God bless the beginning that is available today in the one-day window. And God bless the 21-day journey that begins today and that ends at the threshold of everything that was prepared for the interior that was prepared for it. The link is in the description. The